The soul-stirring battle ended, and everyone hurriedly rested. A great many people were severely wounded, and a great many had even died in battle on the battlefield. Of course, the Een souls had paid an even greater price. In the end, a great many saints moved together, causing a devastating blow to the Een souls. However, after death, the soul fragments would head to the netherworld, which was equivalent to adding battle prowess to the netherworld out of thin air. Meanwhile, in the case of the living realm, nurturing an elite would have to be done step by step, and it would take a very long time. From this aspect alone, the living realm couldn't afford to waste any more time. What do you guys think the netherworld beings are aiming for? The large black dog asked. Ling Han, the large black dog, the little azure dragon, Ding Shu, and Qi Menghan formed a small alliance. That's right. This is really baffling. Ding Shu also clasped his head, unable to figure it out no matter what. Launching a war and contesting for territory was for nothing more than population and resources, but what did Een souls want the population and resources of the living realm for? Indeed, killing Yang souls would allow the netherworld to increase its population for a short period of time. However, this would be killing the goose that lays the golden egg. Only by maintaining the endless growth of the Yang souls would the netherworld have an endless supply of new troops. Een souls that hadn't developed intelligence couldn't think of this, but it wouldn't be that even Een saints couldn't think of it. Ordinarily, with Een and Yang separated, each guarding their own side, minding their own business, this was the best result. Why did one party have to violate the law? There's definitely a big secret that we don't know about, the little azure dragon said in a deadpan voice. Che! Everyone gave him the middle finger. His words seemed to be very profound, but in truth it was just saying what was obvious. Additionally, even the Een saint calls himself a chess piece. Could it be that a great emperor's celestial corpse has appeared in the netherworld? The large black dog stroked his chin. Previously, the information that Jihua Een saint had revealed was really chilling. If even saints were pawns, then who would be qualified to play the game? A great emperor. The netherworld can't possibly give birth to a great emperor, Qi Menghan said with absolute certainty. Our ancestor entered the netherworld before, and he's 100% sure that the netherworld doesn't have the environment to give rise to a great emperor. The ancestor she was talking about was definitely the ancestral King Donglin. Since an ancestral king had already said that it was impossible for the netherworld to give rise to a great emperor, then it was definitely impossible. The ancestral king was one that had already stepped into this threshold, so he was naturally the most qualified to make this declaration. Could it be a great emperor had died, and after his death, entered into the netherworld, and became a great emperor in a different manner? Ding Shu speculated. Everyone nodded in agreement. Although the netherworld didn't possess the foundations to give rise to a great emperor, what if they had the experience of becoming a great emperor originally? Impossible, Qi Menghan said with a shake of her head. According to our ancestor, the great emperor is far too powerful. It's also because of this that once the ancestral king dies, his soul will be absorbed by heaven and earth and become a part of the regulations of heaven and earth. Thus, it is definitely impossible that a great emperor would appear in the netherworld. Her words were resolute, and it was clear that she was absolutely certain. This was the conclusion that the ancestral King Donglin had come to. There was no doubt that it was true. Everyone were scratching their heads in confusion. They couldn't figure it out no matter what. However, even the saints were completely confused, so just how knowledgeable were they? Then, with Ling Han and the others, a few true self tiers and spirit transformation tier discussing here, what conclusion could they come to? Forget it. Let's hurry up and increase our strength. In the end, everyone could only say helplessly. Ling Han smiled at Ding Shu and said, Hey, when are you acknowledging me as big brother? Hey, I still haven't advanced to the spirit transformation tier yet, so as long as I don't advance to the spirit transformation tier, I'll always have a sliver of hope, Ding Shu said with his head held high. Ling Han's expression was filled with suspicion. You won't never break through to spirit transformation tier for the rest of your life to avoid becoming my underling, right? Fuck you. I will definitely reach 10th form. Ding Shu clenched his fists, his fighting spirit blazing. Hee hee. Everyone returned to rest, and Ling Han also needed to make some adjustments. In this battle, he had profited greatly. He would be rewarded by heaven and earth for killing Yin souls in the living realm, and the Yin souls he had killed this time could be considered uncountable. With destructive energy added with his present terrifying battle prowess, even a spirit transformation tier-level Yin soul would be killed. Thus, the benefits he received were also astonishing. The damaged life force had already been completely mended. Of course, he would never be able to recover the lifespan that he had lost. This was the price that he had to pay for the rapid increase of his cultivation level. It was like there was a regulation of karma. If you wanted to take a shortcut, you would definitely have to pay a price. With a lifespan of about 1,000 years, Ling Han was still able to afford it. Now that the life force has recovered, I have nothing to worry about. He was not so foolhardy to use the Source Tao Stone again. Instead, he was anticipating the invasion of the Yin souls that would follow. His life force had recovered to the consummate level, and if he was rewarded again, it would definitely help him increase his cultivation level. Several days later, the Yin souls once again wreaked havoc. This time, the main battlefield was not on the 11th planet, but there were still a considerable number of Yin souls that had come. Ling Han had killed innumerable enemies, and had also received a great many rewards from the heaven and earth. His cultivation level instantly had a clear improvement. Invigorating, Ling Han was filled with anticipation. After battling here for 1.5 years, he should be able to reach the end of the 10th form and qualify to break through to spiritual transformation tier. Furthermore, this was improving one's cultivation level through battle, so there was absolutely no need to worry that his cultivation was advancing too fast, and his foundations would be unstable. Yin souls launched a minor offensive once every 3 days, and a major offensive once every 10 days, as if they wanted to completely exhaust the accumulation of their forces over these countless years. The living realm side suffered great losses, but as long as they survived, they all had astonishing improvements. However, this kind of benefit was not something that everyone could enjoy evenly, because the Yin souls would not be injured by mystical power, and only high-level energy and regulations would be able to injure them. It would be extremely straining for those below the true self tier to deal with the Yin souls. Thus, those participating in the battles here were at least at the true self tier. If core formation tiers and cauldron forging tiers came, not only would they not be able to reap any benefits, they would even lose their lives. In a blink of an eye, 1 year had passed. Ling Han had already cultivated the 8th true self to the 10th form. He was only missing the last true self, and he would be able to touch the end of the true self tier. If the Yin souls are still so cooperative, it would probably take another month. Ling Han broke into a grin. He was really looking forward to it. "Little Han," the large black dog's solemn voice rang out from outside. "And?" Ling Han walked out. "The Yin souls are here again," the large black dog said in excitement. For them, the invasion of the Yin souls was actually a gift, and if someone gave a gift, and it was a great gift at that, who would not be happy? "All right, let's move out." Ling Han charged out with the large black dog, little azure dragon, Chi Menghan, and the 7 babies. This was another great opportunity to improve his cultivation. Of course, the Yin souls weren't purely here to deliver gifts. Under their continuous barrage, the living realm side also suffered heavy losses. After all, not everyone was as powerful as Ling Han and the others. Furthermore, if he really encountered a powerful Yin soul, Ling Han could still use the star steps and immediately flee with his people. How many people could possess such an advantage? Everything was normal. When the living realm elites confirmed the main target of attack for the Yin soul army, a large number of saints and venerate tiers rushed over and started a massacre. The chaos was almost instantly pacified. But this time, it seemed a little different. The void suddenly tore apart, and a long river surged over. Ling Han immediately exclaimed in surprise. And Ding Shu also appeared very stunned. "What's wrong?" the large black dog and the others hurriedly asked. Ling Han took a deep breath. "This river seems a little familiar. You think so too?" Ding Shu looked towards Ling Han. Ling Han nodded. "If both of us think that way, then I'm sure we are not mistaken." "Hey, what kind of riddle are you guys playing?" The little azure dragon didn't have much patience, and was already so anxious that it was about to stomp its feet. That Een river from dark clouds hell, Ling Han said darkly, finally unraveling the mystery. What? Everyone was stunned. The dark clouds hell was a dangerous place in this universe. It was hidden inside a black hole, and there were great dangers within. Even a saint with an imperial weapon could possibly die if they entered. But that should be completely unrelated to this place. Why had the Een river of the dark clouds hell suddenly appeared here? Moreover, wasn't the dark clouds hell hidden inside the black hole? Little Han, could it be that you've both seen wrongly? It just looks similar, the large black dog said. That's right, that's right. There are many such great rivers in the world, and it may not be that one. The little azure dragon also nodded repeatedly. Yes or no, it's very easy to prove, Ling Han said in a deep voice. How? Qi Menghan asked. Is the boatman there? Ding Shu continued. The sudden appearance of this great river stunned everyone. In the vast universe, what did the sudden appearance of a great river mean? In any case, the Een Soul army had already been defeated. A great many people put away their weapons and looked towards the skies. The Een river surged and flowed endlessly. There was clearly no riverbed, but it was as if the great river was controlled by an invisible power, and the waters did not seep out in the slightest. All of a sudden, everyone felt a frightening Een chi seeping directly into their bones, and every single one of them trembled endlessly. This was a bone-deep chill that could not be erased. What was going on here? A cold and sinister river appeared out of nowhere. No matter how they thought about it, this did not seem like a good thing. Even the saints came over and stood on the banks of the river, looking alert. Look! Someone pointed into the distance of the river. Everyone looked over, and their hearts clenched. There was actually a small ship slowly sailing over. In fact, it couldn't even be considered a ship. It could only be called a boat, and there was a boatman standing at the bow of the boat, who was presently slowly holding onto a bamboo pole. If this happened on some planet, that would be very normal. However, in the universe, a cold river suddenly stretched out, and a boatman appeared in the river. No matter how one thought about it, it didn't seem right. Ling Han turned to look at Ding Shu, and Ding Shu coincidentally turned to look at him as well. The two of them frowned, and a powerful chill rose up in their hearts. And this kind of small boat, there was actually not just one. Very quickly, another small boat appeared, then a third, and a fourth. There were more and more of them, and they filed off. As they sailed closer, everyone could clearly see that these boatmen all had greenish-white skin, and their eyes were dull, as if they had been dead for a very, very long time. This was not a Een soul. On the contrary, it was like a walking corpse that had lost its soul. Humph, how pretentious, a saint said coldly. He raised his hand and pressed down, and instantly, a large hand that was comparable to a planet appeared, blasting towards those small rafts. The attack of a saint was world-shaking. However, just as this large hand was about to descend, a sword light flashed past, incredibly stunning, illuminating even the dark universe. In the skies, that giant hand was suddenly severed into two halves, which fell from either side of the great river, yet did not touch the great river in the slightest. Such a terrifying attack was dispersed just like that. Hiss! Everyone was stunned upon seeing this. The person who had attacked just then was a saint. Even a saint's attack had been so easily blocked, so what cultivation level was the person who had moved just then? It had to be a saint. Where did it come from? This wasn't a Een soul. Could it be that, aside from Een souls, there were other kinds of strange existences? All of a sudden, all the saints looked like they were facing a great enemy. Merely the Een souls causing chaos was enough to give them a headache. And now a new enemy was going to appear? A saint's expression suddenly changed drastically. He was from the Thousand-Spirit Imperial clan. Unbroken, what's wrong? A saint beside him asked. The unbroken saint took a deep breath, pointed at a small raft and said, "The person on board is a former saint of our Thousand-Spirit Imperial clan that disappeared a very long time ago." What? Though this was a conversation between the two of them, There were saints all around them, so they naturally managed to easily hear the conversation between the two of them. Could it be that person? A saint suddenly recalled. A saint from the Thousand-Spirit Imperial clan suddenly disappeared, and only the Imperial weapon flew back to the clan on its own, and this became a mystery for all eternity. In the past, this saint of our clan had once brought the Imperial weapon to the Dark Cloud's Hell to investigate. However, not long after, the Imperial weapon flew back to our clan on its own, and there was no more news of that saint from then onwards. The unbroken saint said slowly. A great many years had already passed, so the blow rendered through the death of a saint could not possibly shake the foundations of the Thousand-Spirit Imperial clan. Because a new saint had already appeared, the unbroken saint did not mind revealing that secret from all those years ago. That was something that had happened tens of millions of years ago. But how could it not be shocking that a former saint had suddenly reappeared? He also needed the saints to give him some advice. What was going on here? How could a saint live for tens of millions of years? Then what the hell was this former saint in front of him? Dark Cloud's Hell. All the saints frowned deeply. This was a land of desolation in the universe. Though it was also the sole source of Source Tao stones, and had drawn the envy of who knew how many imperial clans, none of them dared to launch a large-scale assault. Now, a river that belonged to the Dark Cloud's Hell had suddenly appeared, and a predecessor that had been lost countless years ago had turned into a boatman. No matter how one thought about it, this would make one feel a chill run down their spine. Just when these saints were confused, the boatman launched an attack. Boom! A terrifying attack was launched. These boatmen were either saints or venerate tears, and their abilities were too terrifying. In an instant, a hole was torn open in their ranks, and they penetrated deeply, attacking towards the 18th planet. Stop them! All the saints hurriedly shouted. Immediately, saints revived the imperial weapons and attacked those strange boatmen. The awakening of the imperial weapon was equivalent to the revival of a great emperor. This battle prowess was naturally terrifying. With a single strike, those boatmen were like straws, scattering in all directions. They were completely outmatched. When saints encountered a great emperor, they could only flee upon hearing his arrival. If they clashed head-on, they would definitely die. Instantly, a few boatmen were smashed into smithereens. However, there was a strange force that sucked the shattered pieces of these boatmen into the great river. In just a short while, these boatmen emerged from the great river. They were complete and had come back to life. No. They should have died long ago. Thus, it was fine even if they were shattered. They just had to rebuild their bodies. Seeing this scene, everyone's scalps went numb. This was too terrifying. Countless saint-level and venerate-level elites joined the battle. This was already enough to give them a headache, and what was more terrifying was that these things were actually undying. That naturally caused them to lose all hope. How were they supposed to continue fighting? Even if you killed them 10,000 times, they could still be revived 10,000 times. They could not be killed completely at all. There's no such thing as a problem with no solution in this world, Ling Han said from below. I believe that Yin River's revival ability is also limited. But the problem is, even if it can only be revived 2 to 3 times, this is enough to make one's head hurt, Ding Shu said with a frown. That's right. This was a huge problem. Furthermore, they did not know where the revival limit of the Yin River was. This made them feel uncertain, and would make them feel even more hopeless. Boom! In the universe, the fierce battle was still continuing. The saint that had awakened the imperial weapon unleashed a massacre. The imperial weapon showed its might, and there was no match for it at all. Groups of boatmen were destroyed, and the Yin River was like a river of life, endlessly reviving them. However, there was a time limit to the awakening of the imperial weapon. Very quickly, that saint couldn't hold on any longer, and retreated to the side. If he continued on, he would be sucked dry by the imperial weapon. Thankfully, another saint immediately took up the responsibility, and similarly revived the imperial weapon, sweeping aside all opposition. However, the Yin Soul army made a comeback, and there was also a Yin saint that was similarly brandishing the imperial weapon, striking the heavens above and shattering the 9 earths below. It was boundlessly terrifying. Close combat had begun, and the situation had become incredibly dire. This time, the Een souls had reinforcements. The boatmen that had come out of the Een River were too terrifying. They were all saint level and venerate level. With their combined forces, not only were they not inferior to the living realm side, they even looked like they were about to surpass them. Thankfully, the living realm side had many imperial weapons, and under the continuous awakening, they were still able to stabilize the situation. Boom! Right at this moment, the void split open, and a sea of blood appeared. Fuck! Ling Han couldn't help but curse. No way! Qi Minghan's cherry mouth was also slightly agape, similarly extremely stunned. She was no stranger to this sea of blood. At that time, 3 saints had joined forces, bringing the imperial weapon into this sea of blood. In the end, there were endless saint corpses in this sea of blood, and they were forcefully chased out. Afterwards, a great many imperial clans joined forces and barged in together with the imperial weapon, but it was also useless. In the end, they left in a sorry state. Why was this sea of blood here to join in on the excitement at such a crucial moment? Ling Han couldn't help but think. Jihuayin Saint had said that they were all chess pieces, and the only difference was that the saint from the living realm was a chess piece that was ignorant. To the imperial clans, this sea of blood was naturally not unfamiliar to them. All the saints looked incredibly livid. They were done for. If the corpses of the saints in the sea of blood also joined the battle, and were to help the Een souls at that, what else could they do but flee in disarray? Fight with all their might? It was indeed possible that the Een souls would be blocked here, but most of the saints here would probably die as well. Just ask, how many saints would have such great awareness and be willing to sacrifice themselves? The sea of blood boiled. Xiao, xiao, xiao. One after another, figures appeared and joined the battle, and the target of their attacks was none other than the saints from the living realm. They were done for. Seeing this scene, despair rose up from the bottom of everyone's hearts. The 2 lands of danger contained a great number of saint corpses, and now these saint corpses had actually all revived at the same time. They could even come back to life after being destroyed by the imperial weapon, so how were they supposed to withstand this invasion? Everyone's fighting spirit fell drastically, and even the saints had no desire to continue fighting. It could be clearly seen that the line of defense formed by the saints and venerate tiers was rapidly crumbling, and a large number of Een souls took advantage of the opening to charge out, charging towards the 33 planets. As long as these planets were shattered, the formation would disperse on its own, and the Een souls would be able to penetrate straight in. At this moment, Ling Han actually felt a sliver of curiosity. Een souls all had the help of the Sea of Blood, the saints and venerate tiers of the Een River. When these elites attacked, even the combined forces of the imperial clans could only just barely resist. Then what was the point of ordinary Een souls participating in the battle? This great formation could only trap sect masters at most. Venerates should be able to forcibly break through. Then, for the Netherworld army, their elites were enough to sweep aside all opposition in the world, so why would they still care about those mere pawns? Previously, Jihuayin Saint had already said that this was a game of chess. Then, ordinary Een souls should be considered pawns, right? So, pawns also had the special effect of pawns? Little Han, we should retreat, the large black dog shouted. Ling Han nodded. It was indeed time to retreat. With the Netherworld Coalition army charging over, the defense line formed by the saints would fall sooner or later. Furthermore, these saints had clearly lost their fighting spirit, so the rate at which the defense line crumbled would also be sped up. Retreat! Retreat! The saints also issued the command to retreat. By now, the Een Soul army was already unstoppable. If they fought a bloody battle here, it would only expend their power. Instantly, the transfer formation flashed repeatedly, and everyone began a large retreat. Ling Han also threw out the formation foundations. Wrapped in white light, they hurriedly retreated. When they reappeared, they were already very, very far away from the mountain sea heaven. However, even at such a far distance, they could still see the great battle that was breaking out in the universe. Endless brilliance was flickering, and the aftermath of energy surged over, turning into a terrifying storm. Boom! In the sky, a ball of light suddenly exploded. It was extremely blinding, and one couldn't even open their eyes. A planet has been obliterated, Ling Han said darkly. Sigh! Everyone sighed. The situation was really taking a sharp turn for the worse. Who would have thought that the netherworld would have such powerful helpers? One of the planets had been obliterated, and the formation was naturally destroyed. From now onwards, the Yin souls would be able to penetrate deeply, and no one would be able to stop them. Ling Han grimaced. Why was it not peaceful wherever he went? There was hysteria in the Genesis world, wanting to devour all dimensions and destroy all life. He had initially thought that it would be quiet here, but after a few days of peace, the matter of Yin souls wreaking havoc actually appeared again. It was absolutely impossible for living beings and Yin souls to coexist, so this was another unsolvable situation. The so-called dark period in history was referring to the invasion of Yin souls? Then, at this kind of moment, there should be a great emperor appearing to pacify the world. Hong! 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 It was as if fireworks were being set off in the skies. Another planet exploded, releasing a brilliant light. There was an indescribable beauty about it, but everyone only felt a chill. The Yin Soul Coalition army was unstoppable. If they continued to wreak havoc like this, would there still be a place for living beings in this world? Next, were they going to enter into an era of complete darkness? Boom, boom, boom. Right now, only the sound of planets exploding could be heard. Everyone remained silent. No one was in the mood to speak. Hee. You all still haven't given up. A voice suddenly rang out in everyone's minds, and a young monk suddenly appeared in the skies. He was called a young monk because he was actually very, very young. He looked to be only 15 or 16 years old. However, his body wasn't small at all. In fact, his bald head was the size of a whole planet. The little monk moved, his left palm striking out at the sea of blood, while his right palm struck out at the Yin River. He actually wanted to snipe the two great monsters at the same time. See, boom! A terrifying scene appeared. The young monk struck out with both hands, and endless regulations lit up, as if the whole universe had been lit up. The two palms struck, and the Yin River and the Sea of Blood were actually forced to retreat. Motherfucker! Holy fuck! Everyone was dumbfounded. Meanwhile, a large number of saints hadn't retreated too far, and they all started to curse. Was this little monk trying to defy the heavens? How many corpses of saints were there in the Yin River and the Sea of Blood? Though they were called corpse, they still possessed battle prowess on the level of saints. Thus, to force the Sea of Blood and the Yin River back with a single strike, just how terrifying was the power needed? Could it be that a great emperor had already appeared in this universe? But now that a new emperor had appeared, how could there possibly be no news of it at all? Could it be Buddhist land's strongest Buddha son? Someone asked in a trembling voice. Buddhist land was the same as various great imperial clans. There was Golden Generation and Silver Generation, and it was said that the Buddhist son that belonged to Golden Generation had long since reached sect master tier. Yet now, he had actually become emperor? Was it really that exaggerated? No, this definitely isn't that Buddha son from the Buddhist land, a saint said. He had seen that Buddha son from the Buddhist land before, and he was completely different from this young monk. This is far too astonishing. This young monk is genuinely only 15 or 16 years old. Such a young great emperor? Another saint said. This little monk isn't a great emperor yet, but his abilities have far surpassed that of a 9-star saint. The saint from the 1,000-spirit imperial clan said. Could it be pseudo-emperor? All the saints exclaimed in shock. Indeed, upon closer observation, they discovered that this little monk was indeed not an ancestral king. He was still slightly away from that, but a great deal stronger than a saint. Thus, there was only one possibility, and that was a pseudo-emperor. The little monk was incredibly domineering, and after another few consecutive moves, he blasted the Yin River and the Sea of Blood into continuous retreat. Countless saints and venerate tier corpses charged out, but in front of a pseudo-emperor, they were not enough at all. With a single blow, they were all blasted to smithereens. So what if you could be revived by the Ain River and the Sea of Blood? A pseudo-emperor was not an imperial weapon, and did not need to be awakened. At any time, a pseudo-emperor could maintain a prime state. 6 Buddhist weapons, the young monk exclaimed softly. He sent out a palm strike, and the Buddhist staff, Skanda staff, and the other divine weapons appeared behind him. They emitted golden light, and Hong blasted towards Ain River and the Sea of Blood. Boom! This was the ultimate move of a pseudo-emperor. With a single strike, the Sea of Blood and Ain River exploded. Doga, who would have thought? Not only did you not die, but you even managed to live a second life. A booming voice reverberated through the Ain River. It was clearly a sound, but like divine sense, it instantly spread to every corner of the universe, and everyone could hear it clearly. Who was this person? There were only corpses in the Ain River. Though every single one of them had astonishing battle prowess, all of them were walking corpses. They had never seen any of them open their mouths to speak. And now someone in the Ain River spoke. This voice, just hearing it would cause one to feel chills all over their body, and reverence rise up from the depths of their hearts. It was as if that was a supreme being that they could only kneel on the ground and look up at it. The master of the Ain River? The true master of the dark clouds hell? Hold on. Doga? Buddha Doga? After a moment of shock, everyone suddenly realized that the meaning behind these words was also incredibly frightening. Was this little monk Buddha Doga? No, not the Buddha Doga from hundreds of millions of years ago, but his second incarnation. In the past, Buddha Doga was only left with a sheet of skin. Could it be that it was an old sheet of skin that he had shed, while his physical body had lived a second life? Heavens, living a second life, what kind of shocking news was this? Ling Han was also taken aback. This young monk with delicate features was actually Buddha Doga? That Buddha Doga that had killed countless saints in the Black Heaven Divine Temple? He gritted his teeth. He really needed some time to digest this. You should have returned to dust long ago. What are you waiting for? The small monk asked calmly. Since he didn't retort, it meant that he really was the Buddha Doga that had lived a second life. Humph, at our level, what we pursue is nothing more than eternal life. The person in the Ain River said. Doga, don't meddle in other people's business. Otherwise, I will end your life here. However, Buddha Doga's expression was calm as he said, those who defy the heavens will ultimately suffer a divine punishment. What's the point of you hiding in the Ain River and struggling at death's door? Moreover, you can give it a try. Will you kill me? Or will I kill you? When he said the last words, he suddenly exploded with a baleful killing intent that was indescribably terrifying. So what if they were saints? They all humphed, their expressions extremely pained. This was a pseudo-emperor. Beneath the Black Heaven Divine Temple, who knew how many saints had been captured by this lord and tortured to death. Now, he had lived a second life and his battle prowess had probably risen instead of decreasing. Suppressing saints was really child's play. In this world, the new ancestral king had yet to appear, so the Buddha Doga was the strongest existence. There was no other that could compare. Gagaga! A strange laugh rang out from the Ain River. Doga, you are too arrogant. However, for the sake of your senior brother, I will not drop down to your level this time. In any case, there is still a little bit of time left. Boom! The void shattered, and the Ain River instantly retreated, sinking completely into the void. Then, the void closed, and the Ain River was no longer seen, as if it had never existed. No sound was heard from within the Sea of Blood, but it had also entered into the void. The two super threats were resolved by Buddha Doga alone. With the departure of these two powerful reinforcements, the Ain Soul army no longer wreaked havoc, and immediately retreated, returning to the mountain sea heaven. Buddha Doga stood proudly in the universe. That massive figure seemed to be able to illuminate the entire universe, and everyone in the surrounding galaxy could see it clearly. Greetings, Lord Doga. A saint stepped forward, and his manifested body was also millions and millions of meters tall. He tried to get closer, I am the Golden Cauldron Imperial Clan's Rainbow Saint Light Saint. Lord Doga, do you have time to pay a visit to our humble clan? This was a pseudo-emperor, an awesome character who already had one foot into emperor tier. He was definitely an ultimate VIP. Pa! Buddha Doga sent out a palm strike, and the Rainbow Light Saint was instantly sent flying. Fuck. Seeing this scene, everyone gritted their teeth. That was a saint, an existence that was close to invincible in this world. He was practically standing at the peak of martial arts. Furthermore, the Rainbow Light Saint was a saint of the Imperial clans, and held the Imperial weapon in his hand. Was this really appropriate? Buddha Doga humphed coldly and said, I hate people like you the most. Stop trying to worm your way into being friends with me. In the distance, the Rainbow Light Saint had already stood still. An incredibly clear palm print had appeared on his face. He was in an incredibly awkward situation. He had taken the initiative to approach, yet he had actually been slapped? How humiliating. Wang, he activated the Imperial weapon at the first instant, and said harshly, Doga, even when the Ancestral King appears, he is still incredibly polite towards the Imperial clans. You are merely a pseudo-emperor, and you actually dare to hit me. Buddha Doga glanced at him coldly and said, If you continue to make noise, I'll kill you. How domineering. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This mighty figure from the ancient times was still as awesome as always. In the past, he had imprisoned and tortured saints, allowing them to experience the calamity of hell. And now, he had casually slapped a saint from an imperial clan. That was how a true man should be. Faced with the domineering attitude of Doga, the Rainbow Light Saint hesitated slightly. Being slapped in full public, he naturally wanted to get his pride back. But the problem here was this was a pseudo-emperor in front of him, a god of death that had committed boundless sins in the ancient times. If he couldn't pacify him, what if he was killed by the other party? A saint and the imperial weapon were still unable to deal with a pseudo-emperor, so it would be useless even if he died. Who would be able to avenge him? Moreover, if the pseudo-emperor wanted to flee, would the saint be able to catch up with him with the imperial weapon? Unless a deadly trap was set up, and dozens of saints carried the imperial weapons to ambush and kill, it would be impossible to stop a pseudo-emperor who wanted to leave. But to have the saints of the other imperial clans join forces with him, how could that be possible? Who would be willing to take such a risk? The Rainbow Light Saint hesitated for a moment before finally calming down the imperial weapon and forcefully suppressing his anger. Being outmatched by a pseudo-emperor, it should be understandable. Buddha Doga looked around, and no one dared to make eye contact with him. This was a pseudo-emperor. With the word emperor, it was equivalent to being invincible. After sweeping a glance over them, Buddha Doga turned his gaze to Ling Han. With a single step, Buddha Doga appeared in front of Ling Han. His colossal figure also returned to his normal form, like an ordinary little monk. However, there was a Buddha halo at the back of his head that was exuding golden light, making him appear incredibly sacred. Ling Han didn't dare to think that this person was a benevolent person. He was someone who could create hell for saints at the slightest provocation. How could he not be vicious and merciless? His heart clenched, but he did not panic too much. If Buddha Doga wanted to kill him, he could have done so in the Black Heaven Divine Temple. He wouldn't have needed to wait until now. Young people grow up very quickly, Buddha Doga said with a nod. However, he looked like a little monk at this moment, so speaking in this manner naturally made him appear old and experienced. In front of this person, even the little azure dragon and the large black dog didn't dare to speak cheekily. They obediently stood on the sidelines. Ling Han smiled and said, Thank you for your praise, Senior. I've often heard about you, Buddha Doga said. Interesting. Ling Han was slightly flattered. A pseudo-emperor would actually pay attention to him. This was really unexpected. I will continue to work hard, he said. Buddha Doga couldn't help but laugh in spite of himself. He nodded and didn't say anything else. He took another step, and a golden path appeared. With a single step, he instantly disappeared into the boundless distance. The power of a pseudo-emperor was indescribably mysterious. All of a sudden, a great many saints' eyes were focused on Ling Han. Previously, a saint had stepped forward to strike up a conversation with him, and Buddha had directly sent him flying with a slap. However, he had taken the initiative to talk to a junior just now, and it seemed like they were having a great conversation at that. How could everyone not be surprised? But why was this person Ling Han? Now, Ling Han had become a thorn in the side of the imperial clans. A great many imperial clans wanted to get rid of him, yet Buddha actually concerned himself with Ling Han. Though he had only said a few words just now, and they could not be sure that Buddha admired Ling Han very much. But what if? What if they killed Ling Han and made Buddha unhappy? If it was the 9 Mountains Saint added with the imperial weapon, the various great imperial clans could at least hold on. Worst come to worst, they could hold on until the 9 Mountains Saint died. They refused to believe that the 9 Suns Holy Land would be able to nurture another saint in a short amount of time. This required background and great fortune. However, in the case of Pseudo-Emperor Sai, these imperial clan elites shook their heads. They could not afford to trifle with him, not even the slightest bit. The awakening of the imperial weapon could probably intimidate him for a while, but would they be able to maintain this state forever? Was it so difficult to kill a measly true self-tier cultivator? When they saw Ling Han, these imperial clan saints all felt sullen. Now, Ling Han was equivalent to having double insurance, so how were they supposed to make a move? Even the Battle God Palace had to consider carefully. If they angered Buddha, perhaps this force that had hidden for millions and millions of years would be razed to the ground. Ling Han, on the other hand, did not think that Buddha was deliberately taking care of him. This kind of elite should only have the goal of becoming emperor in his eyes. It was purely because he thought that Ling Han was good at causing trouble, so he had deliberately come to praise him. Right now, the souls of the mountain sea heaven had been suppressed, meaning that they wouldn't come out to cause trouble for the time being. Thus, this place would be refurbished, with saints taking turns to stand guard. Meanwhile, the others returned to do whatever they were doing. However, there was a sword hanging over everyone's hearts. There should be 2 incomparably terrifying beings in the River and the Sea of Blood. Perhaps they were also pseudo-emperors. Otherwise, with how domineering Buddha was, he couldn't possibly watch them retreat helplessly. Right now, they had been chased off by Buddha. However, this didn't mean that they would never return. On the other hand, the reason why they had compromised was because they felt that the time had not arrived yet. No one knew what this time was referring to, but the danger would make a comeback. This should be a sure bet. At that time, the 2 pseudo-emperors would make a comeback with troops of souls and the dead. Moreover, they would even move personally. Just how terrifying was that? Moreover, there were already 3 pseudo-emperors now, so how could those of the Golden Generation and Silver Generation not be burning with anxiety? The path to becoming emperor had opened, and these 3 had even set 1 foot on the finishing line, but they were still at the starting line. How were they supposed to compete? The tournament had not even begun, and the results had already been announced. Who would be willing to accept this? After returning to the Ancestral King Academy, the atmosphere of cultivation suddenly became extremely tense. Since the 3 pseudo-emperors had not taken that last step, it meant that everyone still had a chance. Furthermore, from the conversation between Buddha and the master of the River, they should both be antiques, and had only managed to live to this era through special means. Thus, even if they were pseudo-emperors, they would definitely face even more difficulties in becoming emperor. Thus, though everyone was temporarily lagging behind, and furthermore, they were not just a little bit behind, there was still a sliver of hope that they could become emperor. On this path, there was no such thing as first come, first served. There was no such thing as fairness or injustice. There was only hard work, and they could only forge onwards bravely. What did it matter that they would be bleeding and battered? What did it matter that they had failed in the end? Only by putting in the effort would they be able to live without regrets, and have no regrets of living this life. By the looks of it now, the 2 from the River and Sea of Blood should both be pseudo-emperors as well. Causing so much trouble, their purpose must be for the sake of becoming emperor. The large black dog deduced. It was only a pseudo-emperor that could kill so many saints. Just look at Buddha, and it was clear just how many saints had been captured and experimented on by him. It's extremely likely that they're losers from the imperial path millions and millions of years ago. However, through some special method, they managed to struggle at death's door and live to this era. The little azure dragon also said, just like Buddha Doga, who lived a second life and wants to continue contesting for the throne. Sigh, with such an opponent. The pressure is so great, Ding Shu exclaimed ruefully. Meanwhile, Ling Han glanced at him, saying, You've lost, so hurry up and acknowledge me as the boss. Hey, as long as I don't break through to the spiritual transformation tier, this bet will never end. Ding Shu hurriedly broke into a run, to avoid being mocked by Ling Han again. Right now, the Ancestral King Academy appeared especially calm. Everyone was working hard on their cultivation. Ling Han went to check on the Empress and Hun Yo. They had both reached the end of the core formation tier, and could now attempt to break through to the true self tier. However, the advancement of the little red bird's cultivation level was astonishing, because she was the first to advance into the true self tier. When she saw Ling Han, she instantly became aggressive, wanting to duel with him and turn the tables in their relations. Ling Han directly grabbed the little azure dragon, letting this pair of enemies fight. Though the little red bird was extraordinary, its cultivation level was not as high as the little azure dragon's. Furthermore, the little azure dragon was also a body arts user, so its power was even more violent. Even if the little red bird's flames could burn 4-star divine metal against the little azure dragon's physique, that was still somewhat difficult, and its flames could not burn through it at the first instant. In the end, the little red bird was ruthlessly beaten, and obediently continued to follow Ling Han. Looking at the little red bird whose feathers were all disheveled, Ling Han sighed, and said to the little azure dragon, You don't know how to have tender feelings for the fairer sex at all. You won't be able to find a girlfriend like this. Why would Grandpa Dragon want a girlfriend? The little azure dragon asked directly. When you grow up, it'll be too late for regrets. The little azure dragon was still in the form of a 4-legged snake, and the growth of the dragon race was slow in the first place. It would need at least 10,000 years to be considered mature. Thus, even though this guy's cultivation level increased very quickly, his mind was still like a child's. I curse that you won't be able to get a wife for the rest of your life. Meanwhile, the little red bird poked a straw doll one. It hated the little azure dragon to the core. Sure enough, they were truly a quarrelsome but loving couple. However, after returning to the Ancestral King Academy, although there was still a large amount of cultivation resources provided, the rate of advancement of cultivation level was completely incomparable to refining the Source Tao Stone, or killing a Yin soul to obtain a reward from heaven and earth. After 3 months, Ling Han had only cultivated the 8th true self to the 10th form. He was only one true self away from being able to completely cultivate the entire true self tier. I still need about 3 months. Ling Han sighed. Under the stimulation of the supreme elites, the likes of Buddha Doga and the others, every single one of them was cultivating with all their might, trying to rush their cultivation level as soon as possible. For example, the silver generation had all advanced into the spiritual transformation tier, and the well-known ones had already become sect master elites, qualified to be called great elites. The golden generation was even more incredible. It was said that 2 of them already had 1 foot into venerate tier, and the day they became venerates could possibly be within 2 to 3 years. Could not be helped. Those walking at the forefront of the imperial path were already pseudo-emperors. If they still did not rush, even if they were supremely talented, so what? There could only be one emperor in a single era. Ling Han first stopped cultivating. Only by striking a balance between work and rest would he be able to maintain the continuous improvement of his cultivation level. Otherwise, it was possible that he would not be able to reach it even if he tried his best. He left, planning to walk around in the academy to change his mood. The Ancestral King Academy was very large. If he did not use his movement technique and just walked slowly step by step, it would take him at least half a year to complete a full circle, and if he wanted to tour every corner, that would need even more time than that. Ling Han was in no hurry. He merely admired the mountains and waters, and his next step was to break through to spiritual transformation tier. Naturally, he needed to comprehend the Tao of heaven and earth, And where was the Tao of heaven and earth? It was in the environment. When he walked to the side of a lake, he saw the rippling waves, and when the sunlight danced wildly on the surface of the lake like golden snakes, he suddenly felt something. He sat down in a cross-legged position, and endless enlightenment dawned on him. Boom! Energy from heaven and earth surged over, and in his mind, the ninth true self was actually rapidly advancing towards the 10th form. Enlightenment. If anyone saw this, they would definitely be incredibly envious, jealous, and hateful. Others may not even be able to get a chance of enlightenment in their lifetime. But what about Ling Han? Being able to gain enlightenment while taking a stroll, what could be more infuriating than that? 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Ling Han sat as still as a rock, and the 9-colored light exuded by the ninth true self in his mind was also becoming dimmer and dimmer. This naturally was not a bad thing, but rather a great thing. It meant that he was rapidly advancing towards the 10th form. Enlightenment was the most awesome. It was like heaven and earth had given you a cheat code. It wouldn't be strange for someone to even advance 3 minor levels of cultivation level. However, Ling Han had truly experienced enlightenment too many times, so it wasn't as exaggerated as this. However, as long as he could quickly cultivate to the 10th form, he would have profited greatly. Isn't that Ling Han? On the 4th day, 2 people passed by. They were both enchanting young men, and one of them holding a leash attached to a fierce beast in hand. That was a blood-colored fierce tiger, its wild nature still present, its eyes shining fiercely. These were 2 imperial sons of the Silver Generation. One was Su Yukei of the White Feather Imperial Clan, and the other was the Kong Wuyang of the Peacock Imperial Clan. It was him who had the leash on that fierce beast, the Great Tiger. This guy is actually still in the mood to sit idly by the lake? Su Yukei appeared slightly surprised. What time was it now? Even the Golden Generation cultivated diligently, trying to catch up to the likes of Buddha Doga and the others. However, what about Ling Han? Have you given up on becoming emperor? No. Can you sense the power of heaven and earth? Kong Wuyang was startled, then asked Su Yukei solemnly. The energy of heaven and earth is flowing towards him, and the regulations have also been captured. After Su Yukei sensed for a moment, he immediately looked surprised. Hiss! This speed is too astonishing. Could it be that he has broken through? Who do you think would break through in public? Kong Wuyang countered. Su Yukei instantly came to a realization. He experienced enlightenment. Both of them looked extremely jealous. Enlightenment. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for every cultivator. Even if they were Silver Generation elites, and had indeed experienced enlightenment before, they had only experienced enlightenment once or twice in total. Thus, they naturally knew just how beneficial enlightenment could be. The bottleneck in cultivating was non-existent in the face of enlightenment. We can't let this brat succeed, Kong Wuyang suddenly said. Su Yukei frowned and said, This is the academy. If we publicly harass him, it will be very difficult for us to escape cleanly. This was mainly because Ling Han had the support of a saint who wielded an imperial weapon. In fact, there was even a pseudo-emperor behind him, so they didn't dare to provoke Ling Han. Hee. I came out to walk around with the cat, and accidentally caused the cat to alert him. You can't blame me for that, right? Kong Wuyang smiled. After all, who asked him not to be in his own room? Wonderful! Su Yukei instantly clapped his hands. Kong Wuyang undid the chains on the blood tiger, allowing it to move freely. This was a ferocious beast. The moment it regained its freedom, it immediately growled at Su Yukei and Kong Wuyang, as if it wanted to attack them. However, Kong Wuyang's eyes only sharpened, and this ferocious beast was so frightened that it fled with its tail between its legs. It was only a true self-tier cultivator, so how could it possibly be a match for a spiritual transformation tier cultivator? Vicious beasts may not have developed intelligence, but it did not mean that they were as stupid as pigs. Avoiding elites was the instinct of living beings. However, this fierce beast had only taken 2 steps when it spotted Ling Han, and instantly, its viciousness increased again. It snuck forwards, slowly advancing towards Ling Han. Only when it was extremely close did it suddenly launch an attack. With a shio, it darted out, opened its eerie bloody mouth, and bit out at Ling Han's neck. Seeing this scene, both Kong Wuyang and Su Yukei smirked coldly. If the blood tiger succeeded, then even if Ling Han didn't die, he would be crippled. If it didn't, then Ling Han's enlightenment would definitely be interrupted. Whichever the result was, they would be happy to see it. Moreover, this was indeed somewhat related to them. However, they had been walking a cat, so it was impossible for them to keep a constant eye on the cat, right? Moreover, if you wanted to cultivate, you should have stayed inside your room. Who could you blame for running outside to cultivate? Moreover, you are also a true self-tier, and being wounded by a true self-tier fierce beast, that is also because you yourself are not strong enough, right? No matter how one looked at it, more of the responsibility laid White Ling Han. As for them, they had only made a small mistake. Chilla, the blood tiger, bit down solidly. It was done. Kong Wuyang and Su Kei were both overjoyed. They had not thought that such a difficult person like Ling Han would actually die in the mouth of a wild beast. It was too easy, practically as easy as blowing off dust. However, they were soon stunned, because Ling Han was still sitting there completely unscathed. The scene of his neck being bitten off did not appear. Fuck! What kind of neck do you have? Is it divine metal? Even if it was divine metal, with the sharp fangs of fierce beasts, it would still be able to cause considerable damage to divine metals of the same level. Otherwise, with fierce beasts being unable to use celestial techniques, how could they possibly pose a great threat to cultivators? The blood tiger was also taken aback. With its limited intelligence, it felt that this was extremely strange. It refused to give up. Crackle! It bit down again. It was still useless. On the contrary, the impact caused its teeth to hurt. What was going on? Right at this moment, it felt the prey it was biting move. It stood up, and a terrifying aura instantly surged out, making it instinctively feel fear. That was a kind of fear towards a supreme great beast. Woo! The blood tiger hurriedly loosened its jaws and retreated repeatedly, its tail clamped between its legs. How disappointing! It didn't bite him to death, Su Yukei said harshly. He's the #1 elite of the true self-tier, after all. If he were so easily bitten to death, he wouldn't deserve the name of #1, Kong Wuyang said calmly. However, his enlightenment has also been interrupted. We've reached our goal. True, Su Yukei said with a nod. A smile tugged at the corners of his lips. But why didn't they think about why Ling Han hadn't stood up previously? That was because he had already completed his appreciation. In his mind, the 9th true self was also like a mortal body, not showing any brilliance, and looking very ordinary. Come, let's go provoke him, Kong Wuyang said with a smile. All right. Su Yuk's interest was instantly piqued. The two of them walked side by side, heading towards Ling Han. I'm really sorry, Kong Wuyang said. I was walking around with the cat. I just let it walk around on its own. I didn't expect its wild nature to be so hard to tame, and it actually disturbed Junior Brother Ling. Oh, right, why is Junior Brother Ling cultivating here? You weren't affected, were you? Su Yukei asked pretentiously. Ling Han glanced at the two of them and said calmly, If I was affected, how do you plan on compensating? Compensation. Kong Wuyang laughed loudly. I was only slightly negligent, yet you're already putting on airs? Why aren't you cultivating in your room? Why have you come here? And you still want compensation? What a huge joke. No compensation? Ling Han also smiled. Kong Wuyang issued a command through his divine sense, commanding the blood tiger to continue attacking Ling Han. Under his training, though this ferocious beast's wild nature was still hard to calm, it was still very willing to obey the command to attack. Even if it knew that Ling Han was powerful, the blood tiger was even more aware of its master's might. This was a spiritual transformation tier elite that had subdued it completely. Thus, after receiving the command, the blood tiger practically did not hesitate at all. With a leap, it bit out at Ling Han. Pong! Ling Han didn't even turn his head. With a single punch, this blood tiger was forcefully killed. You actually dared to beat my beast pet to death, Kong Wuyong immediately said coldly, I spent a lot of effort to buy this, so how are you going to compensate me? Hee hee. I'm going to make you suffer a great loss, and you would still have to humbly offer your apologies. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh in spite of himself. You allow wild beasts to injure others, and still want me to compensate you? Firstly, don't spout nonsense. Secondly, so what if I bully you? Kong Wuyong's expression was filled with pride. Could it be that you want to use force against me? He was a spiritual transformation tier elite. Spirit transformation tier, as well as aptitude as one of the silver generation, allowed his battle prowess to sweep aside ordinary spirit transformation tiers. His battle prowess could easily defeat spirit transformation tier second change or even third change, so wouldn't it be easy to deal with a true self tier? He was deliberately trying to anger Ling Han, so that Ling Han would take the initiative to attack him. Then, even if he severely injured Ling Han, no one would be able to say anything. In the martial arts world, the hierarchy of status was maintained. If a lower cultivation level cultivator actively attacked a higher cultivation level cultivator, then it would already be considered merciful if they weren't killed. Ling Han, don't be rash. You are nothing but a true self tier. Su Yukei deliberately tried to mediate, but every word was stoking the flames of anger. Moreover, it was indeed you who had beaten Brother Kong's beast pet to death. Logically speaking, you should apologize to Brother Kong. Ling Han smiled and said, You two think I'm at the true self tier, so you can humiliate me as you please, right? So what if I am? Come bite me? Kong Wuyong said proudly. His appearance was really a little despicable. All right, I'll oblige you. Ling Han leaped out and charged towards Kong Wuyong. Kong Wuyong was not shocked, but rather overjoyed. Haha, you were the one who took the initiative to attack. He had already recorded this. At that time, he would only have to erase the previous content and directly broadcast the scene of Ling Han taking the initiative to attack. There was irrefutable evidence. Who would be able to speak up for Ling Han? You definitely have to swallow this loss in silence. How dare you? He shouted loudly, and delivered a palm strike at Ling Han. Of course, he still didn't dare to kill Ling Han. He had only used 1% of his power in this palm strike, but for a spirit transformation tier, 1% of his power was enough to severely wound the 8th form of the true self tier. Ling Han was unafraid, and greeted the incoming attack with a punch. Pong! The two of them exchanged a blow, and the scene of Kong Wuyong and Su Yuk's eyes popping out in shock appeared. Ling Han blocked it. Not only had he blocked it, but he had even forced Kong Wuyong to retreat continuously. What was going on? Kong Wuyong and Su Yukei were both numb with shock. You are only a true self tier. Hold on, did this guy break through at some time? The two of them observed closely, sensing the aura that Ling Han was exuding. True self tier, definitely the true self tier. Then, this was terrifying. A true self-tier cultivator was actually capable of competing with a spirit transformation tier cultivator in power, and had even won. What kind of monster was this? Ling Han didn't give the two of them any time to ponder. He immediately charged over again. Boom! Kong Wuyong hurriedly counterattacked. This time he naturally went all out. He did not want to be forced back again. Right now, his chest was still slightly burning. In this exchange of blows, both of them took a few steps back, and it was actually a tie. Holy fuck! Kong Wuyong and Su Yukei both wanted to curse the heavens. Was this real? A measly true self tier cultivator could actually fight a spirit transformation tier cultivator head-on. Moreover, it was an imperial sun, and even a silver generation cultivator at that. This should be a completely impossible feat, however. The truth was right in front of their eyes, so how could they deny it? Monster, he was definitely a monster. Kong Wuyong was in a very passive position. He was presently in an incredibly stunned state, and being bombarded madly by Ling Han, he could only parry. However, his strength was ultimately not inferior to Ling Han. Very soon, he had adjusted his condition, and immediately turned the situation around. Hong! 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 The two of them continued to exchange blows. Energy fluctuations spread into the distance. Kong Wuyong couldn't help but feel anxious. If the scene of him and Ling Han fighting forcefully was seen by others, what face would he have left? Would he become the first spirit transformation tier cultivator in history to tie with a true self tier? If he were to be recorded in the history books in this manner, his name would stink for all eternity. He roared loudly, and his spiritual body walked out of his body. Both himself and his spiritual body used the imperial technique at the same time, which blasted madly towards Ling Han. The imperial technique was indeed awesome. Furthermore, the higher the cultivation level, the greater the gap between the imperial technique and the saint technique, and the ordinary celestial technique. This had increased his battle prowess by a whole 12 heavens. Furthermore, this was the simultaneous upgrade of oneself and one's spiritual body, so how terrifying was it? Ling Han naturally wouldn't be reserved either. He similarly used the imperial technique. The heavenly saber was fierce, and his battle prowess was similarly shocking. However, he wasn't a spirit transformation tier elite after all, so it was impossible for him to manifest a spiritual body. Thus, he was naturally at a disadvantage. It was a 1-on-2 battle, and both enemies possessed strength that was not inferior to his own. So Ling Han appeared to be slightly strained. However, he had already taken the preliminary step of creating his own path, and every casual move he made was an amazing move, forcibly holding up the situation. It was hard to determine the victor. Su Uk could only gape in shock upon seeing this. There was actually such a powerful true self tier in this world? Had he seen wrongly? Was he dreaming? Heavens! Sensing the great commotion here, people soon ran over to investigate the situation. When they discovered that a battle had broken out, they naturally did not mind watching the excitement. But when they saw clearly that Kong Wuyong's opponent was Ling Han, everyone felt as if their heads were about to explode. Is that really Ling Han? I didn't see wrongly, right? Hiss! Ling Han is actually battling with a spirit transformation tier. Kong Wuyong was a spirit transformation tier cultivator. This news had already spread throughout the entire academy. Moreover, even if one hadn't received the news, he could easily confirm this fact just by looking at the spiritual body that he had summoned. Ling Han should have also advanced into spirit transformation tier, right? That's right. He has long since reached the 7th form. Furthermore, he has cultivated a mortal body, so it is impossible for him to break through to the 8th form. Thus, it would be very normal for him to break through to the spirit transformation tier. Everyone thought the opposite way around. It should be Ling Han who was more low-key, and did not make any big boasts about breaking through to spirit transformation tier. After all, there were really quite a number of people who had broken through to the spirit transformation tier in this period of time in the academy. That's not right. Immediately, someone said in a trembling voice, "You guys sense again. Is the aura that Ling Han is exuding really spirit transformation tier?" Everyone sensed it, and then all of them revealed expressions of extreme shock. The true self tier. Fuck! He's actually at the true self tier. How was this possible? Everyone inhaled sharply. They were all deeply stunned, and could not say a single word. So what if it was the golden generation? Had they ever reached such heights when they were in the true self tier? Capable of standing against a spirit transformation tier? Was this guy really only capable of tailing the golden generation? Or had he already reached the level of being one of the most outstanding members of the golden generation? In fact, he had even surpassed them? Now, the only feeling that everyone had left was shock. Kong Wuyong became more and more anxious. There were too many people watching. If he was still so sloppy, and was still unable to deal with Ling Han after so long, how would he be able to face others in the future? However, he had already used the imperial technique, so how was he supposed to further increase his battle prowess? Burning imperial blood? What a joke. The imperial blood was the trump card of trump cards, so how could it be used casually? Furthermore, even if he won with the imperial blood, how could he convince the masses? However, without using the imperial blood, Kong Wuyong would really be unable to suppress Ling Han. Could it be that it was going to end in a draw? Ling Han humphed, and his attacks became incredibly powerful. Every move he made looked like he wanted to drag Kong Wuyong down with him. Kong Wuyong naturally didn't want to die with Ling Han, so he could only choose to retreat. This caused him to instantly fall into a disadvantage. Everyone was even more stunned, shaking their heads and sighing. Ling Han was really too strong. This true self-tier was going to defy the heavens. The more Kong Wuyong fought, the more displeased he felt. He could not accept such a result. He was a dignified spirit transformation tier and silver generation elite. He definitely couldn't lose. Fine, do you think I don't dare to fight you head-on? Kong Wuyong no longer dodged. Instead, he looked like he was going to take Ling Han head-on. Scare me? Humph, could it be that you would not be afraid of both sides being wounded? Boom! However, he had guessed wrongly. Faced with an attack that looked like he was going to drag Ling Han down with him, Ling Han did not dodge at all and directly charged towards him. Fuck! At this moment, Kong Wuyong was dumbfounded. At least a few thousand curse words raced through his mind. Why do you fucking want to drag me down with you? If I had known this earlier, I would rather be humiliated than do this. However, it was already too late for regrets now. Both of their attacks had landed on each other. Kong Wuyong was instantly sent flying. All the bones in his body were broken, and he opened his mouth, spitting out blood. After sustaining such a heavy injury, the spiritual body immediately dissipated. Thankfully, he had not died. Furthermore, he did not seem to have suffered any fatal or crippling injuries. He only had to rest for a few months, and he would be able to recover completely. He relaxed slightly, but when he looked at Ling Han again, he instantly couldn't help but throw up blood madly. He looked as if nothing had happened. In other words, he was completely unscathed. You should be called Ling Wuyong, right one? He tragically discovered that Ling Han was perfectly fine. To say nothing of being severely injured and throwing up blood. Not even a single hair of his was missing. No wonder this guy kept looking like he was going to fight him to the death. It wasn't that the other party wanted to scare him with this kind of attitude, but rather that this guy's defense was practically freakish. He felt so wronged. To actually fight a guy with freakish defense to the death, wasn't that just courting death? Pooh! He spat out blood continuously, feeling extremely depressed. Ling Han smiled faintly. He had cultivated body art, so how strong was his physique? Moreover, he could automatically disperse all attacks within 6 heavens, and it was enough as long as he retained a little power to form a shield. Wasn't it a joke to fight him to the death? Fuck! Ling Han actually won? The fact that a true self-tier cultivator could fight a spirit transformation tier head-on, and a silver generation imperial sun at that, was already enough to make one's scalp go numb, alright? But Ling Han actually won, and this was even more inconceivable. Ling Han looked at Su Yuk and said, "Do you also want to seek justice from me?" Su Yuk's strength was no weaker than Kong Wuyong's. But after seeing Ling Han's strength and freakishness, what confidence did he still have? Without saying a word, he turned around and left. Ling Han didn't give chase. This was the academy after all, and it was established by the imperial clans. No matter what, he had to restrain himself. He smiled, turned, and left as well. The enlightenment this time directly allowed him to reach the consummate level of the true self tier, and he could now attempt to break through to the spirit transformation tier. The Ancestral King Academy was filled with tumultuous waves. Those who had not witnessed it with their own eyes could not believe that this true self-tier cultivator could actually battle a spiritual transformation tier cultivator, and even win at that. Wasn't that the biggest joke in the world? However, Imperial Sun after Imperial Sun expressed that it was true, and added with the fact that there were also recorded images as proof. Others had no choice but to believe that there really was a freakish heaven-defying freak in this world. This time, the members of the Golden Generation were all rendered speechless. Were they this powerful in the past? Since they were not so powerful, what else could they say? Now, there were undercurrents surging, and the threat that Ling Han posed was too great. He was even more freakish than the Golden Generation. If his cultivation level really increased, then in the competition on the Imperial path, who else would be a match for him? Even if Ling Han didn't become emperor in the end, no one at the same cultivation level could rival him. Who would the heaven and earth allow to become emperor then? Get rid of him? In the past, this would have still been possible. Although the combination of the 9 Mountain Saint and the imperial weapon were terrifying, faced with the threat of a future great emperor, A great many imperial clans would still steal their hearts and kill Ling Han while he was still maturing. But now, Buddha Doga was a pseudo-emperor. If he was really angered, it was probable that even an imperial clan would be destroyed. This was also why Ling Han dared to unleash his full strength. He was aware that his relations with Buddha Doga was not very close. However, others didn't know this, and they naturally couldn't verify this with Buddha Doga. Ling Han couldn't care less. He closed his doors and began to concentrate on breaking through to the spiritual transformation tier. In his mind, the 9 true selves were all like mortal bodies, but occasionally, a terrifying aura would circulate, as if it could suppress the heavens. Ling Han immersed himself in the Great Tao. This took 2 months' time. He finally obtained enough comprehension and began to break through to spiritual transformation tier. The spiritual transformation tier meant being able to transform the true self, one after another, into a spiritual body in one's mind. How many true selves do you have? In the end, that was how many changes you would be able to reach. Thus, these 2 cultivation levels were closely related. Ling Han began to stimulate the first true self to transform into a spiritual body. He naturally chose the true self of destruction. This was the most powerful true self with destruction energy as its core. Even though it was only a change in form, taking this step was extremely difficult. Because the change in form was only superficial, what truly caused a qualitative change was the soul and the grasp of the Tao of heaven and earth. Without being able to take this crucial step in the understanding of Great Tao, there was no way he could succeed. Ling Han's accumulation over the past 2 months was both his appreciation of the Tao of heaven and earth, as well as the final tempering of his cultivation level. Since he had taken this step, it meant that he was already confident. Moreover, for him, the difficulty of breaking through to the 9th and 10th form was even higher than breaking through to the spirit transformation tier. Thus, now that he had overcome both of the great difficulties, how difficult would it be to break through to the spirit transformation tier? The true self of destruction was only a virtual body. Ling Han had experimented with it before, and after unleashing it, it would not have the effect of wounding the enemy at all. However, it would be different if it was a spiritual body. This would unleash a terrifying battle prowess that was not inferior to the original. Come! He activated the power of dimension in his body, stimulating the transformation of the true self of destruction. This was the only way because with his current cultivation level, he was still not qualified to come into contact with such a profound level of energy. However, the power of dimension was like a super nutritious tonic to the true self of destruction. In any case, Ling Han's comprehension was already enough, so the true self began to undergo a qualitative change. Multiple mysterious seals appeared on the true self of destruction. With the boost from the regulations of heaven and earth, it transformed from virtual to solid, changing rapidly. Correspondingly, Ling Han's physique was also rumbling loudly. This was because the upper limit of his physique was also further lifted. The energy of heaven and earth surged over, increasing his power. Woo! Ling Han released a muffled groan. His power had increased too quickly, causing his body to be slightly unable to bear it. Pa pa pa! His skin immediately split apart, and blood gushed out, causing him to instantly turn into a figure of blood. Not only that, but the bones in his body were also cracking. They were actually grinding themselves, as if they were about to turn into dust. Ling Han couldn't help but feel shocked. If this continued, he wouldn't even have broken through, and his whole person would be finished before then. Stop? How could that be allowed? Ling Han immediately ruled out this option. He only hesitated slightly, and then continued this process. He had broken through to 10 forms, so he was definitely different from the rest. Ling Han's eyes flashed with madness. On the path of pursuing the strongest, he was definitely a maniac. There was no room for retreat on this path. Again. Pa pa pa. His skin exploded, and his bones shattered. Ling Han's whole person collapsed. In fact, cracks even appeared on his skull, which was densely covered with small cracks like a spider's web. However, his life essence was actually still as vigorous as fire, his vitality soaring sky-high. Ling Han gritted his teeth and continued. Pa, all the bones in his body were shattered, and it was as if his whole person had turned into blood clay. Only his mind was unbroken, and was undergoing that incomparably crucial evolution. Ling Han guarded this precious territory, and the true self of destruction gradually took solid form. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye, and the true self of destruction finally turned completely into a spiritual body. Spiritual transformation tier. Instantly, an ancient battle drum sounded in the heaven and earth. Countless flowers fluttered, and fragrance wafted for millions and millions of miles. Ling Han's body quickly began to reforge. This was a new fetus that had evolved from an old body and was rapidly growing. In just a few hours, it was already no different from before. However, Ling Han could feel that this new body had a qualitative change and was even more energetic than the old body. When he completed the growth of his new body, the phenomenon of heaven and earth also rapidly disappeared, and in its place, there were thunderclaps and dark clouds. Quang! Ling Han only felt a tremor in his mind, and a small golden figure appeared. It held a crystalline sword in hand, and charged towards the spiritual body of destruction in his mind. It was an internal demon. The spiritual body of destruction immediately charged forwards. It was only a single punch, and pong, the tiny golden figure was annihilated. That was it? Even Ling Han faltered for a moment. You can be considered an internal demon for better or worse, yet you're actually dealt with a single punch? However, this was indeed the case. The dark clouds in the sky had already dispersed, and no new internal demon had appeared. Fine then. With a thought from Ling Han, the spiritual body of destruction walked out of his body. It was in human form, but its features and body were a little blurry, and could not be seen clearly at all. Couldn't be helped. He was only at the early stage of the spiritual transformation tier, so he naturally hadn't cultivated his first spiritual body to the extreme yet. Otherwise, this spiritual body would look exactly like him. Of course, there was no rule stating that the spiritual body had to be completely the same as the original, and could also be molded into the form of a weapon. In short, the spiritual body was used to assist in battle and cultivation. It was fine as long as it could achieve this effect. How strong am I now? Ling Han was extremely curious. He activated the star steps and instantly exited the Ancestral King Academy. He appeared in a primitive forest. I'll find a wild beast to spar with. He strolled forward, and not long after, a giant wolf that was as long as 300 meters walked out. Equals true self tier. Ling Han shook his head. How could a true self tier be enough for him to test his abilities now? He only glared at it, and the giant wolf was instantly scared out of its wits. It directly sprawled out on the ground, trembling as it waited for death. Ling Han didn't make a move. He had only come to test his strength, and there was no need for him to kill for no reason. He continued to walk, searching for spiritual transformation tier beasts. However, there were really too few vicious beasts of this level. Thankfully, Ling Han was a formations grandmaster. Using the ley lines to explore, he soon found a vicious beast that met the criteria. With a flash, he had already arrived in a valley. He released a battle cry, and instantly, a golden-haired ape leaped out. It was only 30 meters tall, but the aura it exuded was more than 100 times stronger than the giant wolf from before. The golden ape was filled with ferocity. 2 fangs protruded from its mouth, and killing intent exuded from its eyes. However, it did not attack at the first instant, but merely stared at Ling Han. Ferocious beasts were bloodthirsty and violent, but they had an instinctive fear of powerful beings. In the eyes of this golden ape, Ling Han was this kind of elite. Come! Ling Han smiled, and took the initiative to charge out. In the face of provocation, the wild beast naturally would not cower either. The golden ape immediately roared, and clapped its arms on its chest. Then it charged towards Ling Han. Hong! 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 The man and ape battled fiercely, and Ling Han unleashed his full power. This ferocious beast was very powerful, and in terms of power, it was even superior to Ling Han. Furthermore, the golden ape's claws were incredibly sharp, not inferior to a celestial tool of the same level. It also posed a certain amount of threat to Ling Han, tearing his clothes. However, that was all there was to it. Ling Han's skin was frighteningly tough, and such sharp, massive claws only caused some white claw marks to appear on his body. It was completely unable to break through his defenses. After growing a new body, my body has undergone a qualitative change. Not only has my vitality increased greatly, my defense has also increased greatly. Ling Han nodded internally. Combined with the fact that he could disperse attacks within 6 heavens, he was practically a freak. My power is more or less equivalent to 15 heavens of spirit transformation tier. Even Ling Han was gritting his teeth. Every time a normal spirit transformation tier cultivator raised their cultivation level by a minor level, they would probably be able to increase their power by 3 heavens. Then, even if it was a spirit transformation tier 5th change cultivator, they would only be able to possess 15 heavens of power. This was completely related to the quality of the true selves that had been formed in the past, and not the number of true selves. Thus, this was also why everyone thought that Ling Han was done for when they found out that the true self that he had formed was a mortal body. That's right. How much power could a spiritual body formed from a mortal body have? An advance of 2 heavens? Or 1 heaven? Let's try the spiritual body again. With a thought from Ling Han, the spiritual body immediately manifested, and he threw a punch at the golden ape. Vicious beasts didn't need to cultivate. They only needed to eat, and they would naturally be able to grow to the heights that they should have. Thus, although vicious beasts would also be divided into the likes of spiritual transformation tier and true self tier, the two systems were completely different. Ferocious beasts did not have a spiritual body. The spiritual body and main body joined forces, and the pressure on the golden ape instantly increased. This was not a good test. Ling Han immediately withdrew from the battle, and had the spiritual body fight the golden ape one-on-one. Pong! The spiritual body threw a punch, clashing with the golden ape. The spiritual body instantly retreated rapidly. But though the golden ape had the advantage in power, it was still crying out in pain. As it turned out, its claws were badly mangled. It should be known that the spiritual body was manifested from the true self of destruction, and contained destructive energy, so just how terrifying was its destructive power? No matter how stubborn one was, he shouldn't clash head-on with destructive energy. His spiritual body charged forward aggressively. Whether it was himself or his spiritual body, they were both controlled by Ling Han with a single thought. It was as if he had an additional pair of arms and legs, and he could use them extremely smoothly. Fight, fight, fight. The more the golden ape fought, the more it was at a disadvantage. In terms of power, it was completely at an advantage, but against the destructive energy, it was only seeking its own suffering. Moreover, vicious beasts didn't know any celestial technique, and were mostly focused on close-quarter combat. Only in this way could they display their advantage in power. The problem was, this just happened to be Ling Han's strongest aspect. Going head-on against destructive energy? After exchanging a few more blows, the golden ape screamed in agony before turning around to flee. Its survival instincts took the upper hand. It didn't want to die. Ling Han chuckled, but did not make a move. There was no reason, so he did not want to commit murder. Using the star steps, he returned to the Ancestral King Academy. After breaking through to the next major tier, Ling Han had to report this to the academy. This concerned what level he would be assigned to in the next monthly exam. Otherwise, if a spirit transformation tier went to fight with a true self tier, wouldn't that be torturing noobs? After making his report, he also told the Empress and the others the good news, causing everyone to be overjoyed, and expressed that they wanted to have a good celebration. And when the news that Ling Han had broken through to spiritual transformation tier spread throughout the entire academy, it also caused those silver generation elites who had long since broken through to spiritual transformation tier, and even those golden generation elites to smirk coldly. You've finally come. No matter how freakish you were, you had just broken through to spiritual transformation tier. After all, so how strong could your battle prowess be? Seizing the chance, they would kill this guy. Of course, it had to be done openly and publicly, so that neither the Nine Mountain Saint nor Buddha Doga could fly into a rage because of this. Little Han, come. Grandpa Dog offers you a toast. The large black dog held the wine cup in his paws. Grandpa Dragon also gives you a toast. The little azure dragon also joined in on the excitement. All right. Ling Han raised his cup in return. Meanwhile, the women didn't join in on the excitement. They talked about feminine topics, especially Qi Menghan, who had just joined. She was bombarded with questions from the Empress and Hu Niu, especially some sensitive questions, causing her face to flush bright red. However, you were invincible in the true self tier, and now that you've advanced into the spiritual transformation tier, there should be a lot of people stronger than you. You have to be careful. It was rare for the large black dog to be serious. Ling Han nodded and said, I know. Looks like you'll have to keep a low profile for a while. The little azure dragon said with a smile. That's just right. Once you leave, the first place of the true self tier will fall to Grandpa Dragon. There's still Ding Shu. You have to wait for a while longer, Ling Han said with a smile. Hey, this guy has long since reached the peak stage of the 9th form. Why hasn't he broken through yet? The little azure dragon was extremely displeased. With the help of the Source Dao Stone, he had already cultivated to the 8th form. Once Ding Shu advanced, there would definitely be no one in the true self tier that could be a match for him. Ling Han naturally knew that Ding Shu was putting up a stubborn resistance. To avoid acknowledging him as the boss, he was fixated on the 10th form. However, this really wasn't a matter of how long he would continue to fixate on it. This guy had better not be stubborn and stay in the true self tier for the rest of his life, right? Ling Han smiled. It was not to that extent. Ding Shu had once been the overlord of the Genesis world, so he should know how to choose. Moreover, the ancestral kings from ancient times had only cultivated to the 9th form at most, and that was enough to attain Dao. Time flew by, and the next monthly assessment had already arrived. The Empress and Hu Niu were already qualified to charge into the top 3. This attracted the attention of a great many people. After all, the Empress was extraordinarily beautiful, and her natural talent in cultivation was also so astonishing, which naturally made them dazzling. However, because of Ling Han, no one dared to harass them. In the true self-tier battles, Ding Shu was still ranked first. Previously, Ling Han was absent, so he naturally took first place. The little azure dragon was second, and the large black dog was fifth. This day passed, and it was now the turn for the spirit transformation tiers. The entire academy was also waiting to see how Ling Han would perform. Under the anticipation of countless people, the monthly assessment for spirit transformation tier began. Because Ling Han didn't have a rank for spirit transformation tier, he naturally had to start from the knockout battles. Following the breakthrough of a large number of true self-tier cultivators, there were many spirit transformation tier cultivators. There were some from the golden generation that had not broken through for a long time, as well as outstanding elites of the silver generation. It was said that they had already cultivated to the 6th change or even the 7th change. There were also some powerful Dao Childs from the Holy Lands. They were the same batch as the golden generation, or even from an earlier batch. Some were Spirit Transformation Tier 5th change, and some were Spirit Transformation Tier 6th change. They too could not be underestimated. Of course, after advancing into the Spirit Transformation Tier, while cultivation level was important, the quality of the spiritual body was also important, directly affecting the strength of battle prowess. Thus, it was not impossible that a Spirit Transformation Tier 5th change would lose to a Spirit Transformation Tier 3rd change. Of course, for a Spirit Transformation Tier 5th change to lose to a Spirit Transformation Tier 1st change, the possibility of this was practically non-existent. There were too many people, and Ling Han had to fight 4 knockout battles before he could enter into the ranking battles. In the first round, his luck was not too bad. He drew an opponent that was a Spirit Transformation Tier 2nd change. Furthermore, it was not an imperial son, but rather a Dao child from a holy land. This Dao child was only around 200 years old. In the outside world, he really couldn't be any more outstanding. A 200-year-old Spirit Transformation Tier elite was terrifyingly young. However, in the case of the Ancestral King Academy, this advancement was only SOSO. There were a lot of 100-year-old Spirit Transformation Tiers. This Dao child's name was Wu Qinghuai. He was very handsome and had a lanky figure. There were 2 spheres formed from regulations on his body. One was fire, and the other was ice, and they endlessly revolved around his body. Imperial Sun Xian has asked me to pass on a message to you. If you want to live, it would be best for you to cripple your own cultivation level and apologize to him, he said through divine sense the moment he arrived. Lin Xian? Ling Han chuckled and said, then tell him that before long. I'll chop off his head and use it as a ball, demanding him to cripple his own cultivation level. Was this any way to resolve the problem peacefully? Since you are using your superior strength as a bullying tactic, then don't blame me for being ruthless. Ling Han, how are you worthy of opposing Imperial Sun Xian? Wu Qinghuai asked coldly. Lord Xian is loved by the heavens, and has been blessed by a strange phenomenon at his birth. Now, he is only 100 years old, yet has already cultivated to the consummate level of the minor advanced tier. If it was not for the fact that Lord Xian still wishes to break the supreme limit, he would have long since become a venerate tier elite. Compared to him, you are still very far off. Ling Han couldn't be bothered to speak any more nonsense. He crooked a finger at Wu Qinghuai. Cut the crap. I am going to beat you up now. Haha. You are really arrogant, Wu Qinghuai declared coldly. Though you are indeed very freakish, I am a spirit transformation tier cultivator at the peak stage of second change, which is practically 2 minor levels higher than you. No matter how he thought about it, there was no reason for him to lose. Humph! With a flash, 2 spiritual bodies walked out. He had cultivated the second change to the end, so the 2 spiritual bodies were completely identical to him. If there had to be any difference, it would be that both of his spiritual bodies were flickering with red and white light, though they were very faint. Die! The 3 Wu Qinghuai charged towards Ling Han at the same time. In this battle, spirit tools were prohibited. Thus, their 6 hands formed into fists, palms and claws respectively, striking out different celestial techniques. Regulations boomed, their might terrifying. Ling Han wanted to test out his opponent's strength, so he didn't use his spiritual body. Instead, he simply brandished his fists in response. Pong! With this strike, though Ling Han's figure trembled, the 3 Wu Qinghuai were all sent backwards. What? Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but inhale sharply. Everyone was very clear about Wu Qinghuai's abilities. He had cultivated to 6th form when he was in the True Self tier, and furthermore it was a 2-color True Self. Thus, after advancing into the Spirit Transformation tier, every spiritual body could provide him with 6 heavens of power. 2 complete spiritual bodies would be the power of 12 heavens, and with the combined power of 3 people, the power would naturally be even greater. But even so, Ling Han actually had the upper hand in terms of power. Hiss, what kind of freak was this? Wu Qinghuai had suffered a loss in a single strike, but did not lose his fighting spirit because of this. Instead, he immediately made a comeback, and directly used the Saint technique. His 3 bodies channeled 3 different Saint techniques respectively, complementing each other, causing his battle prowess to increase even further. With the boost from the Saint technique, the battle prowess of each body had reached 21 heavens. With the 3 of them working together, and added with the amplification of each other, their total battle prowess could reach 23 or even 24 heavens. Ling Han also channeled the Saint technique, exchanging blows with Wu Qinghuai. One strike after another with his freakish physique. This was naturally no big deal, but Wu Qinghuai did not have the kind of ability that he did. Under such a head-on clash, he very soon could not hold on any longer, and his face was as pale as could be. After a few more exchanges, he had no choice but to admit defeat. Otherwise, he would attain a great loss. Ling Han smiled faintly before turning around to leave the arena. This time, he did not show off, but everyone's shock did not decrease in the slightest. In a situation when the spiritual body's quality was about the same, then every difference of a minor level would lead to an overwhelming advantage. It was very simple to understand. The other side had an additional spiritual body. Every spiritual body had battle prowess that was on par with oneself, so how crucial was it to have one more or one less? However, Ling Han was 1 minor level below Wu Qinghuai, and he didn't even use his spiritual body, but that was still enough to force Wu Qinghuai to have no option but to lower his head and admit defeat. This meant, Just how high level was his spiritual body? Mortal body? Mortal your sister. Everyone knew that they had definitely been deceived by Ling Han. This guy should have cultivated some kind of secret technique that could hide the quality of the true self. Thus, while he looked like a mortal, in truth, he could possibly be a seven-colored true self. With how freakish this guy is, he's definitely no weaker than the golden generation. Thus, he's at least a 7 colors true self. No, the golden generation wouldn't have been able to defeat a spirit transformation tier while still in true self tier. At the very least, the spirit transformation tier couldn't be at the Imperial Sun's level. So, it's extremely likely that this guy has reached the legendary 9th form, possessing the 8 colors true self. Hiss! Everyone gritted their teeth. This was the 9th form. Even among the golden generation, how many had reached this kind of height? Was there one? Let's just wait and see. We should be able to see his true strength soon. After the first round of elimination battles, very soon the second round began. This time, it was only natural that Ling Han's opponent was stronger. In a knockout battle, it would definitely that the strong would win, and the weak would lose. However, this still wasn't the Imperial Sun. It was still a Dao child. His name was Lu Yu, a spirit transformation tier 3rd change. The moment they clashed, Lu Yu directly summoned all 3 spiritual bodies, surrounding Ling Han. 4 directions, celestial killer formation. Lu Yu gave a soft exclamation, and his 4 bodies moved at the same time, blasting towards Ling Han. He was clearly a level stronger than Wu Qinghuai. Lu Yu's spiritual body should also be 2 colors, but he was a spirit transformation tier 3rd change, and his base power was as high as 18 heavens, which was above Ling Han's. Added with the 4 bodies joining forces and forming a formation, his battle prowess was naturally further boosted. Ling Han took this strike head-on, and his body instantly trembled. He was almost sent flying. His fighting spirit rose, and with a battle cry, he used an imperial technique, regulations channeled, and his battle prowess soared to 30 heavens in a single stroke. Hong! 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 Although Lu Yu possessed 4 bodies, he was still suppressed by Ling Han. What? Everyone was once again shocked. They had already overestimated Ling Han, but only after fighting did they realize that they had still underestimated Ling Han. It's clear now. His power should be 15 heavens. With the use of the imperial technique, his battle prowess has soared to 30 heavens. Isn't the imperial technique only able to boost one's battle prowess by 12 heavens? It is indeed very strange. On this guy, the imperial technique can actually burst out with the battle prowess of 15 heavens. Meanwhile, those venerate tier elites frowned slightly. Their eyes were naturally sharp, and they had guessed the truth. This brat has already begun to walk his own path. Thus, he was able to use the imperial technique to the extent that it surpasses ordinary people. That's because the ancestral kings have all walked their own paths, and only then could they be strong enough to suppress the heaven and earth. This caused all the venerates to feel uneasy. Ling Han had such natural talent, and had even forged his own path. As long as he became a saint, he would be the strongest competitor on the imperial path. Members of the Golden Generation, perhaps your true opponent isn't Buddha Doga, or the 2 in the Sea of Blood and Ain River. Instead, it's this newcomer who hasn't even advanced to the minor advanced tier yet. Ling Han used the imperial technique and instantly gained the upper hand. Under wave after wave of attacks, Lu Yu could only hold on stubbornly, and no longer had the ability to fight back. In the end, Lu Yu could only bow his head in submission. 2 consecutive wins. This was an inconceivable accomplishment. Even for the Silver Generation, when they had just entered the spiritual transformation tier, they could only obediently withdraw their arrogance, because the spirit transformation tier 1st change could at most burst out with battle prowess of over a dozen heavens. So how could they possibly be a match for a veteran spiritual transformation tier? Even if their opponent was only Dao child level. However, Ling Han had overturned all of this. He had even defeated a Dao child that had undergone spirit transformation tier 3rd change, and what was most troubling, he had not gone all out yet. Up until now, Ling Han still hadn't summoned his spiritual body. In other words, he had only used half of his strength. This was too terrifying. In the third round, Ling Han finally drew out an Imperial Sun. Moreover, it was a spirit transformation tier 3rd change. The 1,000-spirit Imperial Clan's Changqing. Ling Han had seen this Imperial Sun in the True Dragon Abyss before. At that time, Changqing was the strongest in the True Self tier. Now, he had long since stepped into the spiritual transformation tier, and furthermore cultivated to the 3rd change. Just how strong would his battle prowess be? As an Imperial Sun, his aura was extraordinary. There was a full moon shining behind him, exuding a golden brilliance. This was a powerful opponent. Ling Han took a deep breath, not daring to be careless in the slightest. Changqing was naturally very cautious as well. If he won, that was natural. What was there to be proud of if a 3rd change had won against a 1st change? But if he lost, then he, an Imperial Sun, would become a laughingstock. Thus, he could only win this battle but could not lose. 3 spiritual bodies materialized from within his body. Their expressions were solemn, and there were 6 colored rays of light around them. This meant that when Changqing had been in the True Self tier, he had formed a 6-colored True Self. Come! A fierce battle could break out at any moment. The moment they exchanged blows, Ling Han discovered that his strength was inferior to his opponent's. Changqing had already cultivated the 3rd change to the middle stage. Thus, his power reached as high as 20 heavens. With the boost of the Imperial technique and the combined power of 3 spiritual bodies, Changqing's battle prowess was at least superior to Ling Han by 3 heavens. There was a publicly acknowledged standard in the cultivation world, and that was once there was a gap of 3 heavens in battle prowess, it would be a crushing advantage. As expected, Changqing immediately had the upper hand. Every move was fierce, blasting Ling Han so hard that he could only parry. This caused everyone to nod repeatedly. They had finally suppressed this guy. But upon further thought, a Silver Generation elite actually had to depend on the advantage of 2 minor levels of cultivation level to be able to suppress Ling Han. Wasn't this proof of how terrifying Ling Han was? However, though Ling Han was at a disadvantage, he did not look like he was about to collapse at all. His defenses were too strong. Even if he was hit a few times, so what? He would only be scratched and be completely unharmed. However, there was a time limit to the battle, and it was far from lasting until the moment Changqing's power was exhausted. The battle would then be forcefully stopped, and the outcome of the battle would naturally be judged based on the advantage and disadvantage of the situation. Thus, if this continued, Ling Han would definitely lose. With a thought from Ling Han, his spiritual body appeared. This was the first time he had revealed his spiritual body in front of everyone, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Even those Venerate tier elites were no exception. However, no matter how they looked, they couldn't find anything special about this spiritual body. It was just as ordinary as the true self that Ling Han had previously displayed. Everyone knew that the quality of the spiritual body directly determined the strength of the cultivator. Ling Han was so powerful, so the quality of his spiritual body must also be incredibly shocking. How could it be so mediocre? This guy is really cautious to still keep his spiritual body secret. Everyone shook their heads, feeling that Ling Han was being too cautious. Again, Ling Han and the spiritual body charged out together, greeting Changqing. The spiritual body took the lead. This was formed by a combination of regulations and the soul. Though it could cause massive damage to a physical body, it itself was not a physical body. It was difficult for the mystical power to injure it, and even if it was damaged, it was fine. As long as it was nurtured in the mind, it would be able to recover to its original state in no time. Thus, spiritual bodies could be used without any scruples, and there was basically no need to worry that they would be destroyed. Pong! The spiritual body of destruction struck out with both fists, each fist attacking one of Changqing's spiritual bodies respectively. Under the boiling of the terrifying power, the spiritual body of destruction was instantly sent backwards, but Changqing's 2 spiritual bodies began to tremble rapidly, flickering inconsistently. Upon another exchange, the battle prowess of these 2 spiritual bodies had clearly dropped greatly. What? This caused everyone to go numb with shock. What was going on here? Could it be that Ling Han's spiritual body could still restrain other spiritual bodies? Otherwise, why did Cheng Qing's spiritual body seem to have been severely injured after the exchange of blows, and his battle prowess had decreased drastically? Others might not be able to see clearly, but with the cultivation level and insight of the Venerate tier elites, how could they not see clearly? This boy's spiritual body seems to have a special ability that can restrain other spiritual bodies. That's right. The spiritual body is formed from regulations. Theoretically speaking, the higher the level of regulations that forms the spiritual body, the more powerful it would be. However, it can even suppress the spiritual body of an imperial son. This is too shocking. All the Venerate tier elites frowned deeply. Ling Han's performance was becoming more and more amazing, and he was looking more and more capable of becoming emperor. Most importantly, the majority of imperial clans were standing on the opposing side of Ling Han. Naturally, they were unwilling to see Ling Han become emperor. Otherwise, without the invasion of the Netherworld, they would be dealt with first. Ling Han's main body was slightly inferior to Cheng Qing's main body in terms of battle prowess, but his spiritual body was invincible in destructive power. Under the barrage of punches, Cheng Qing's 3 spiritual bodies were all severely injured, and he had no choice but to withdraw them into his mind to nurture. In this way, it became Ling Han and the spiritual body of destruction that joined forces to battle Cheng Qing's main body, so it was hard to say who would win. However, before they could determine the victor, the time limit for the battle had already arrived. The Venerates discussed among themselves, and judged Ling Han as having lost. This was too unfair. On the surface it was a tie, but Ling Han was battling Cheng Qing, who was third change while Ling Han was a first change. No matter what, he should be judged to have won, right? In order to suppress Ling Han, these mighty figures were really shameless. Ling Han merely smiled faintly at this. Though his battle prowess could match a silver generation like Cheng Qing, even if he really passed 4 rounds of elimination battles and challenged the top 10, he would definitely not have the slightest chance of winning. Those were all imperial sons above the level of spirit transformation tier 5th change. In fact, there were even golden generation elites among them. If it was just a gap of 1 or 2 minor levels, Ling Han was confident that he could crush him, but if the gap was too wide, no matter how freakish he was, he could not do anything. After all, those people were also geniuses of the present generation. Thus, since he couldn't obtain cultivation resources anyway, what was there to be concerned about? As for worthless fame, he didn't take it to heart. Moreover, did his freakishness need these rankings to prove it? What worried Ling Han was where he was going to obtain cultivation resources. There was no need to think about the Ancestral King Academy for the moment. No matter what, he had to be at least 3rd change or even 4th change first. Only then would he be able to charge towards the top 10, right? Then Immortal? Ling Han shook his head again. Under the powerful suppression of Buddha Doga, the Netherworld army had currently retreated into the mountain sea heaven. If he went over to kill Immortals, and he would be killed at any moment. Dark Cloud's hell? This was fine. His life force had already recovered. Though the life force he had lost could not be recovered, compared to the long lifespan he had left, he was completely capable of sustaining the expenditure. However, he now knew that it was suspected that there was a pseudo-emperor in the Dark Cloud's hell, and if he thought about it carefully, the Source Dao stone appearing out of thin air, was it also related to this master of the Yin River? The more he thought about it, the more terrifying it was. He had best not touch this trouble again. Then what was he to do? It didn't work like this, and it didn't work like that either. Could it be that he had to cultivate diligently on his own? Though the Ancestral King Academy had been modified by many saints, and the power of heaven and earth here was dense, and the regulations were lively, so it was very easy to sense them, this was only an environmental factor. Could not replace cultivation resources. Thus, he still had to go and see if there were any ancient sites that had opened, which could allow him to earn some extra income, and obtain some natural treasures. As he kept an eye out for news on the Galaxy Network, he kept a low profile and cultivated in the academy. However, those silver generations that had been in the spiritual transformation tier previously were all clamoring, waiting for Ling Han to charge up to the spiritual transformation tier. Sure enough, After this monthly exam, Ling Han's strength was revealed. Occasionally, there would be people challenging him, and they were all Imperial sons that were in the spirit transformation tier 3rd change and above. Wasn't it obvious that they wanted to use their superior cultivation level to suppress him? Furthermore, sparring would have to be done in a place where the formations would suppress Ling Han. The so-called fairness was only targeted at Ling Han's star steps. Faced with this kind of provocation, Ling Han naturally ignored it completely. He wasn't stupid. He clearly knew that he would definitely lose and be beaten, yet he still foolishly rushed forwards. But in this way, he continuously forfeited the battle, which also caused many people's impression of him to rapidly deteriorate, thinking that he was cowardly and weak. This was only sparring, and could not possibly kill or cripple. You don't even have the courage to fight? The Empress, the large black dog, and the others were all indignant on Ling Han's behalf. He had clearly suffered injustice, so why was it that Ling Han was in the wrong instead? Ling Han, on the other hand, was completely unconcerned. The best way to respond to all this was through strength. Just you wait. Not long after, Ding Shu also broke through. It wasn't the 10th form, but rather the spiritual transformation tier. In the end, he gave up. If he were to continue fixating on the 10th form, it was possible that he would be trapped in the true self tier for the rest of his life. In any case, in the past, it was possible that the Great Emperor was only the 9th form or in fact only the 8th form. B-boss. He was willing to admit defeat. After breaking through, he came to find Ling Han. Ling Han cracked a smile and nodded. Little Ding. Don't call me that, Ding Shu said angrily. All right, little Shu. Ling Han readily agreed. Ding Shu was even more depressed. However, he was the boss here, so what could he do? Although I recognize you as my boss now, our battle hasn't ended yet, Ding Shu said. If I surpass you in any cultivation level, you'll have to turn around and recognize me as your boss. Sure. Ling Han nodded. On the path of the strongest, he did not think that anyone could surpass him. At most, they could only fight to a tie. Moreover, the spiritual transformation tier was directly linked to the true self tier. Thus, Ding Shu would at least have to wait until the minor advanced tier to be able to compete with him again. There was still a lot of time. Once Ding Shu broke through, the little azure dragon naturally became the #1 cultivator in the true self tier, making him extremely conceited and arrogant. The Empress and Hunyo had also advanced into the true self tier, and similarly maintained the high rate of improvement in their cultivation level. On this day, he was walking around in the academy, wanting to see if he could encounter another chance of enlightenment. Unfortunately, this was something that could only be encountered by luck. It was not something that could come just because he wanted it to. After walking for half a day, he was only here to look at the mountains and waters. Thankfully, he still had Hunyo, the Empress, and Qi Menghan by his side. This could be considered as accompanying these beauties. Why are so many people running towards the entrance? Hunyo suddenly asked curiously. In just a short while, they saw at least 4 groups of people rushing past, all heading in the direction of the academy's entrance. Let's go take a look. Let's go take a look, Hunyo said excitedly. Since they had nothing else to do, the 4 of them headed towards the entrance of the academy. When they arrived, they were all surprised. Why were there so many people here? After asking around, they finally found out what had happened. As it turned out, someone wanted to join the academy, but this person was very arrogant. He wanted to see if the Ancestral King Academy was qualified to take him in. Thus, he sat at the academy's entrance and requested a battle of equal cultivation levels. If anyone could defeat him, then he would join the academy. Fuck, so cocky? Ling Han and the others were all surprised. Faced with this kind of madman, those big shots in the academy could tolerate it? This person was only in the true self tier. Have you guys heard of the 1,000-bird Imperial clan? Someone beside them asked. These words were directed at Qi Menghan. Qi Menghan pondered for a moment and seemed to recall something. Descendant of the 1,000-bird Saint Emperor? Wasn't there no news of this clan since hundreds of millions of years ago? That's right. The 1,000-bird Imperial clan has indeed disappeared for a long time, but they have reappeared now. That person nodded. Could it be that the person is the imperial son of the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan? Qi Mengan immediately made the connection. Yet that person shook his head. This person is the son-in-law of the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan. This time, he has been accompanied by a saint from the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan. Thus, though the higher-ups of the academy are very displeased, it would not be appropriate for them to say anything. Qi Menghan found this strange. This person is still sitting here, so how could it be that no one that can defeat him? That's true. That person smiled bitterly. Recently, it seems like a great many freaks have appeared. This guy has already won 17 consecutive battles, and there is no one that can match 10 moves from him. This was quite impressive. After all, this was the Ancestral King Academy. There were many imperial sons and imperial daughters here, and not one of them was able to withstand 10 moves from him. What's his name? Qi Menghuan asked again. He, Fairy Qi, you must have heard of his name, that person said, his face filled with certainty. Oh, Qi Menghan was astonished. Who is it? Origin. Years ago, there were 3 outstanding freaks who broke records madly on the Galaxy Network. They were Origin, Myriad Dao, and Heaven Crushing. Of course, following Ling Han's arrival on the Galaxy Network, he also broke the records of these people again. Number 1 in the galaxy could be considered very well known. Ling Han had always wanted to know the true identities of these 3 people, but these 3 people had hidden themselves very well, and had not revealed themselves all this while. He had never imagined that he would actually meet Origin, and this guy had actually become the son-in-law of the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan. Ling Han's interest was piqued, and he turned to look at Origin. This was a young man in plain clothes. His appearance was average and could not be considered ugly, nor could he be considered handsome. However, he had an aura of might and dignity. He was clearly just sitting very ordinarily, yet it was as if he was the center of heaven and earth, causing others to involuntarily turn to look at him. With such a large ancestral king academy, are there no elites? A woman said. She was truly beautiful, with eyebrows as white as snow and skin as fair as snow. She held a 7-colored treasured sword in her hand, and her heroic appearance was captivating. This woman was a beauty on the same level as the Empress Qi Menghan and the others. Thus, when they saw her, quite a number of men revealed expressions of infatuation. However, which one of those who could enroll into the Ancestral King Academy wasn't a prodigy? When they heard this woman's words, they all looked furious. Humph, now that the Imperial Sons has advanced into the Spirit Transformation tier, how many of them are still stuck at the True Self tier? They retorted. The beauty waved the treasured sword in her hand. All right, then please send out Spirit Transformation tiers and minor advanced tiers. We'll have a fair battle and see who can block 10 moves from Brother Origin. Brother Origin. Looks like this woman was the noble daughter of the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan, and the wife of Origin. Looking at this woman's exquisite beauty, and looking at Origin's calm expression that showed a faint mockery, it naturally made a great many Imperial sons angry. All right, I'll battle you. Chongqing was the first to jump out. He had once been the strongest of the True Self tier. Though his abilities could not be ranked in the Spirit Transformation tier at present, suppressing his cultivation level in a battle of True Self tier, his battle prowess was definitely astonishing. 7th Grandfather, please set it up. That beauty turned her head and said respectfully in a certain direction. Pong! Instantly, a massive piece of damaged rock dropped down from the skies, landing heavily on the empty space in front of the academy gates. This rock was extraordinarily heavy, shaking the ground so much that it trembled madly. Everyone looked over. This rock looked ordinary, but there were streaks of light flickering at its fractures, giving it a mysterious feeling. If you battle on this rock, everyone's cultivation level will be pulled to the same level, the beauty said. Come on. With a leap, Chongqing had already landed on the damaged rock. One of his hands was clasped behind his back, while his other hand was hooking at Origin in a provoking manner. Origin slowly stood up and unhurriedly leaped onto the damaged rock. Then he said, if you can block 10 moves from me, I'll consider it your victory. Fuck. This was too exaggerated, wasn't it? In a battle of equal cultivation levels, against the silver generation, who would dare make such a boast? Changqing was indeed furious. The other imperial sons also sneered repeatedly, feeling that this origin was really too arrogant. He only broke some records on the galaxy network. Does he really think he's all that impressive? The imperial clans have never been on the galaxy network. Without the participation of the imperial clans, what meaning is there to this kind of first place? Everyone began to mock him. At this moment, they were naturally standing on the same side as Changqing. Changqing shouted loudly and took the initiative to attack. Hong! 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 Although his cultivation level had been suppressed to the true self tier, the silver generation was still the silver generation. His abilities were incredibly terrifying, and as he delivered one attack after another, regulations exploded madly, high-level energy boiling, terrifying to the extreme. For 3 consecutive moves, Origin only dodged. Ha ha ha! Everyone laughed loudly. How boastful! Now that they're truly fighting, he can't even withstand a single blow. By the looks of it, this Origin isn't all that impressive. The large black dog also rushed over and said to Ling Han. Meanwhile, Ling Han shook his head slowly. Huh? You're actually optimistic about this person? The large black dog asked. Just wait and see, Ling Han said. After 3 moves, Origin finally launched a counterattack. Boom! A terrifying aura surged out of his body. It was as if he had turned into a great demon god, and instantly overwhelmed Changqing. Pong! It was only a single move, and Changqing had already been blasted off the damaged rock. With a wah, he threw up blood madly. What? Everyone was dumbfounded. A dignified silver generation was actually defeated in a single move? Next, Origin said calmly, as if he didn't take defeating a silver generation elite to heart at all. Instead, he took it as a matter of course. How arrogant! Another silver generation exchanged blows with him, but he did not manage to avoid Changqing's fate. He first delivered 3 moves, and then was defeated in a single move by Origin. The 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, so what if he suppressed his cultivation level? Origin displayed a powerful dominance, and on the level of true self-tier, he was not only invincible but also overwhelming. Later on, even a golden generation elite made a move, but he was still defeated in 2 to 3 moves. This triggered an earthquake. The golden generation was the strongest generation, and even if this golden generation that had made a move was the weakest existence among them, he was still a whole lot stronger than the silver generation. Hiss! Was this guy who had created a freakish record on the galaxy network really invincible among his peers? But no matter what, they could not allow him to be so arrogant. If they were really blocked at the door, and all of them bowed their heads in submission, how would they be able to face others in future? The problem was, even the golden generation had lost. Was there really anyone who could defeat Origin? Imperial Sun Xian should be able to. Unfortunately, in order to break through his limits, he has gone to some barren land to train. On the other hand, Imperial Sun Qing and Imperial Sun Ming have already advanced into Venerate tier, and have long since left the academy. Even the 3 strongest members of the Golden Generation are unable to move. The others probably won't be able to suppress Origin either. What do we do? Are we really going to allow him to continue being so arrogant? Right at this moment, the little azure dragon stepped onto the stage and issued a challenge to Origin. At present, he was the number 1 elite in the true self tier of the Ancestral King Academy. However, even the Golden Generation had lost, so everyone naturally did not have much confidence in him. When they saw him ascend the stage, no one cheered him on. This infuriated the little azure dragon. Why was there no one optimistic about him? Grandpa Dragon is very angry, and the consequences are very serious, the little azure dragon said. Meanwhile, Origin smiled and said, Not bad. You're even stronger than those trash from before. To defeat you, I might need 100 moves or even more. No one would have thought that Origin would have such a high opinion of the little azure dragon. Yet the little azure dragon wasn't happy at all. It took the initiative to attack, and said loudly, "Pay! How could Grandpa Dragon possibly lose to you?" The two of them immediately began a fierce battle. The little azure dragon was extraordinary. In the past, he had been able to exchange blows with Ling Han. Now that he had cultivated the Imperial Scroll, his abilities had naturally increased even further. Sure enough, he was locked in a fierce battle with Origin. At this moment, it was hard to decide who was stronger between the two of them. Everyone was captivated by the sight. Who would have thought that the little azure dragon would be so powerful? Although he was currently number 1 in the True Self tier, there were the likes of powerful characters like Ling Han and Ding Shu, and added with the fact that the Silver Generation had all broken through to the Spiritual Transformation tier, the value of the little azure dragon being number 1 was naturally insufficient. Only now did they know that the little azure dragon was truly awesome. "That's right. You are worthy of me showing my true strength," Origin stated calmly. Boom! 9 streaks of dense black mist suddenly surged out of his body, and his whole aura changed immediately. Boom! He sent out a palm strike, and terrifying divine patterns intertwined. "Hey! Grandpa Dragon is also going to show his true abilities." The little azure dragon never let people off the hook easily. It immediately opened its mouth and spat out saliva. "Yo!" The little red bird immediately covered its nose, its expression filled with disgust. She was not the only one. The expressions of the others were more or less the same. This fighting style was too shameless. Yet Origin was expressionless. He continued to strike with his palm, and under the boiling of energy, his saliva was immediately annihilated. It was impossible for his saliva to spit onto anyone. Boom! The attack landed, its might indescribably terrifying. The little azure dragon was instantly sent flying, blood seeping from the corner of its mouth. With his powerful physique, he was still wounded. Origin's strength was truly terrifying. The little azure dragon wanted to continue fighting, yet Ling Han leaped over and forcefully dragged it away. "You're not going to battle me?" Origin suddenly asked. "Me?" Ling Han smiled faintly. "Why should I battle you?" He had come to the Ancestral King Academy for the sake of cultivation resources and to discuss the imperial clans. How could he possibly fight for them? Origin faltered for a moment, then nodded at Ling Han, but didn't say anything. "Let go. Grandpa Dragon hasn't lost yet." The little azure dragon was still defiant. "You're no match for him," Ling Han said with certainty. The little azure dragon humphed, but didn't say anything else. Just now, he was just being stubborn as per usual. After a while, he said, "This Origin's strength is not inferior to Ding Shu." Ling Han nodded in understanding. He had the same feeling. Next, Origin continued to provoke, his voice calm. He did not look the slightest bit smug just because he had defeated a few Imperial sons. But the more this was the case, the more furious everyone was. Showing off subconsciously was the most detestable thing. Ding Shu. These Imperial sons all thought of one person. Very quickly, Ding Shu was invited over. When he found out the identity of Origin, Ding Shu immediately cried out. Without anyone provoking him, he himself leaped onto the damaged rock. "I've always wanted to meet the 4 of you," he said loudly. These words came out of nowhere, but Ling Han knew that Ding Shu had always wanted to battle Origin, Myriad Dao, Heaven Crushing, and number 1 in the galaxy. Now that his chance had come, he was naturally excited. A solemn expression appeared on Origin's face, and he said, "You are a good opponent. Haha. Come fight me." Ding Shu charged out, striking out furiously with his palms. Hong! 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 The two of them battled fiercely. Neither of them used their spirit tool, and merely used their own strength to their heart's content. Ding Shu was indeed strong, not the slightest bit inferior to Origin. The two of them exchanged blows, and it was hard to decide who was stronger between them. After several hundred exchanges, Ding Shu finally unleashed his trump card. A mysterious glow enveloped his body, and his battle prowess instantly soared by 3 heavens. In this kind of fierce battle, if one's battle prowess suddenly increased by 3 heavens, that could directly decide the outcome of the battle. However, It was clear that Origin had also been guarding against Ding Shu's ultimate move. 18 streaks of black aura suddenly exploded from his body, turning into 18 giant demonic snakes that counterattacked Ding Shu. Boom! Their most powerful attacks clashed, and both of them trembled. They both retreated and then began to vomit blood. Both of their powerful attacks were directed at each other. Thus, once they unleashed their powerful attacks, it was inevitable that their attacks would be stronger, while their defenses would be weaker. This would cause considerable damage to both of them. I've lost. Ding Shu sighed. Everyone was curious. Wasn't this clearly a tie? In that attack just now, I also used a sliver of spirit transformation tier-level comprehension, Ding Shu said. Fuck. You're far too honest. If you didn't reveal it, who would know? Everyone was speechless. How could there be such a person? Origin, on the other hand, smiled and said, all right, when I break through to spiritual transformation tier, I'll go all out in battle with you again. All right. Ding Shu nodded, and very decisively jumped off the damaged rock. Great. Great. He strode off, still laughing loudly. Crazy. Everyone shook their heads. But even Ding Shu admitted that he was outmatched. So who else could they look for? Ling Han. Everyone turned to look at Ling Han. Then, they all frowned, their expressions awkward, as if they had swallowed flies. To put it bluntly, the Ancestral King Academy was jointly established by a great many imperial clans, and in the eyes of the imperial clans, Ling Han was like a thorn, prickly, bothersome, and heart-piercing. Thus, after Ling Han entered into the academy, he was repeatedly targeted. If it was not for the fact that he still had the Nine Mountain Saint behind him, he would probably have long since been killed, and his corpse thrown into a smelly ditch. And now they had to depend on Ling Han to fight against Origin? No matter how they thought about it, it was a headache. But aside from Ling Han, who else could stand against Origin? They couldn't let this guy sit at the Academy's entrance forever, right? Otherwise, the Ancestral King Academy would really become a joke in the world. Ling Han, you take the field, a Silver Generation elite said to Ling Han. However, this wasn't a request, but rather a command. Ling Han pretended not to hear. Ling Han, this concerns the Academy's honor and humiliation. Don't be too selfish. Another Silver Generation attacked Ling Han. Fuck, why didn't you guys say this when you all came to issue a challenge? Ling Han ignored him. With him being so profligate, no one could do anything about it. However, they couldn't allow Origin to continue being arrogant. So some higher-ups of the Academy came to find Ling Han, hoping that he could make a move. I've been challenged for the past few days, so my body is very weak now. Ling Han immediately complained to this big shot. Fuck you. The big shot's expression was strange. It wasn't like he didn't know that Ling Han hadn't fought at all these days, so how could he be weak? Oh, this guy was taking advantage of the opening to extort him. All right, as long as you can defeat Origin, I will give you a portion of cultivation resources, he said through gritted teeth. There was nothing else that could be done. At present, he could only allow Ling Han to extort him. Ling Han shook his head and said, my body is weak, so one portion isn't enough nutrition. That big shot gritted his teeth. 2 portions. 10 portions. Ling Han made an exorbitant demand. This was a rare opportunity. Impossible. That big shot refused immediately. 10 portions would only be equivalent to 10 months' worth. I haven't even asked for a year yet, Ling Han said with a smile. How about it? If it's a deal, I'll go. If not, then forget it. That big shot stared at Ling Han with a fierce gaze. Ling Han was unafraid and merely smiled. They wanted him to make a move, yet did not give him any benefits. How could that be possible? All right, that big shot agreed. The prerequisite is that you must win. Don't worry, I can't lose, Ling Han said calmly. He strode forwards and had already leaped onto the damaged rock. I thought you didn't want to fight me? Origin asked with a smile. Ling Han rubbed his hands together and said, I've already been paid enough appearance fees, so I naturally don't mind making a move. Ha ha. Origin laughed loudly, but he soon shook his head. However, there is no way you would be a match for me. Oh, Ling Han raised a brow slightly. At the same cultivation level, there is no one that can be my match, Origin said calmly, as if he was just talking about something that could not be more ordinary. Ling Han also smiled. That's good. I am also invincible among my peers, and can sweep aside all opposition. Hearing the conversation between these two people, all the Imperial Sons felt an urge to beat someone up. You guys are really too condescending. To say such words in front of so many Imperial Sons, aren't you afraid that they would be forced to eat their words? But in truth, Ling Han had indeed swept aside all opponents at the same cultivation level, and Origin had also used his abilities to prove that no one was a match for him in a battle of equal cultivation levels. Now, this was the stage for the competition between the two of them. The others were all mediocre, and were only qualified to stand below the stage and watch the battle. There is no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts, Origin said and beckoned Ling Han over. Between the two of us, only one can be invincible among his peers. One. Come! Ling Han laughed loudly and charged towards Origin. How could Origin possibly dodge? He charged towards Ling Han. Hong! 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 Neither of them used any kind of feint. The moment they started fighting, they attacked madly, unleashing their full battle prowess. After a few moves, Ling Han had a complete understanding of Origin's strength. The peak stage of the 9th form of the True Self tier, which was equivalent to Ding Shu. Ling Han somewhat understood why he had come here to issue a challenge at the beginning. That was because this guy also had the idea of breaking through to the 10th form, and wanted to obtain the appreciation of breaking through by fighting with top prodigies. He shook his head. If he wanted to break through to the 10th form, not only would he need appreciation, he would also need the power of dimension, and he couldn't even have used it while breaking through to the 9th form. What did this signify? Origin was the master of a Genesis world. Was that possible? How could there be so many masters of Genesis worlds in this universe? It should only be him and Ding Shu. However, Origin was indeed very strong. No wonder he could fight Ding Shu to a stalemate. In fact, in the end, it was still Ding Shu that was slightly inferior. Ling Han shook his head. If he was also in the 9th form, then Origin could be considered an excellent opponent. However, he had broken through to spiritual transformation tier from the 10th form. Even if he suppressed his cultivation level to true self tier, he would still have the terrifying battle prowess of the 10th form. Who could stand against him? Ling Han instantly gained the upper hand, completely suppressing Origin. This caused the Imperial Sons to have mixed feelings. On the one hand, they could not bear to see how arrogant Origin was, and hoped that his arrogance would be suppressed. But on the other hand, they too did not want to see Ling Han being so awe-inspiring. In fact, they hoped to see Ling Han being defeated. Why weren't they the one who was so powerful? Origin was extremely tenacious. Even though he was at a disadvantage, he still persisted, searching for a chance to turn the tables. However, in front of Ling Han, how could such an opportunity possibly exist? Ling Han was decisive and agile. With a few heavy punches, he defeated Origin. This was a crushing advantage. Even if Origin still had powerful moves that he had yet to use, it would not be able to affect the outcome. I've lost. He smiled calmly, then communicated through divine sense. You have attained the 10th form. This was very obvious. To be able to crush his 9th form, there could only be the 10th form. Ling Han neither denied nor admitted. He merely smiled slightly, turned and left. After Origin was defeated, he quickly completed the admission procedures. He was sent here by the 1,000-bird Imperial clan. Even if the Ancestral King Academy had previously been humiliated, how could they not accept him? Ling Han obtained 10 portions of cultivation resources. Though the Academy didn't like him, it wasn't to the extent that they would go back on their word. Thus, Ling Han refined these resources happily, but even 10 portions of cultivation resources were only enough for a few months. The spiritual body of destruction was gradually becoming complete, and it wouldn't be long before it reached the consummate level of first change. But what was he to do next? Ling Han sighed. In terms of cultivation resources, it was really worrying him to death. However, at this moment, a piece of news spread out from the Academy. The lair of an ancient divine beast had been discovered. What divine beast? The true phoenix. In ancient myths, the true dragon and the true phoenix were equals. If one could discover some celestial medicine, rare treasure or whatnot in the lair of the true phoenix, the gains would naturally be nature-defying. After learning of the news, even the little red bird couldn't sit still any longer. It wanted to go and explore the lair of the true phoenix. According to her, the vermilion bird and the true phoenix both belonged to the fire element category. Although the true phoenix was slightly inferior to the vermilion bird, their mystical power was similar, so it still had great value in cultivation. Che, speaking as if once she entered into the lair of the true phoenix, the secret technique of the true phoenix would be placed in front of her. Very soon, further information was revealed. As it turned out, this lair of the true phoenix was discovered by the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan. However, to enter into this lair of the divine beast, it was difficult. According to the saint's deduction, the true phoenix should have died here. There was a great emperor-level killing formation here. Thus, it was unrealistic to rely on a saint to charge in with the imperial weapon. If one wanted to enter, they would need to use the blood of a large number of prodigies to be able to create an opening. The Thousand-Bird Imperial clan had already tried, but even all the prodigies of an entire imperial clan could only create a small opening, and it could not be passed through at all. It was also because of this that the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan had come to the Ancestral King Academy. Firstly, they wanted to announce their reappearance, and secondly, they wanted the Ancestral King Academy to send out a large number of outstanding disciples to open the lair of the true phoenix with them. The elites of the academy discussed for a while, and then decided to send their disciples to the lair of the true phoenix. Thus, the next step was to select people. Naturally, everyone wanted to go to this lair of the true phoenix, but the more people that went, the lesser their gains would definitely be. Thus, the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan only gave them 100 spots. The elites made their arrangements, and as expected, Ling Han didn't get a spot. He wasn't the only one. The large black dog, the little azure dragon, and the others also didn't get a spot. It was obviously deliberate. In terms of talent, Ling Han was no weaker than the Golden Generation at all. In fact, he was even more talented than them. If even he wasn't qualified to receive a spot, who else was? However, the Ancestral King Academy was controlled by the various imperial clans. They didn't want to give Ling Han and the others a spot, so what could Ling Han and the others do? Make a protest? Even if the Nine Mountain Saint came over with the imperial weapon, there was absolutely no need for them to give any face. Not killing Ling Han was their bottom line, and they still had to help Ling Han become stronger? What a joke. This caused Ling Han and the others to feel both angered and exasperated. How could them, being as weak as they were, be able to oppose the will of saints and venerate tears? What could they do? Could it be that they would have to miss out on such a good opportunity? Right at this moment, someone came to visit Ling Han. Origin. I heard that you were targeted and didn't get a spot? Origin came straight to the point. Ling Han smiled and said, "It can't be helped. I am too outstanding. As the saying goes, the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind." Origin laughed loudly. "I can give you a few spots." "Oh." Ling Han looked at Origin. Ling Han didn't doubt that the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan could give him a spot. In fact, they could even give him a few spots. He was the ideal son-in-law of the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan. Moreover, the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan also seemed to want to nurture him as the future ancestral king, pouring a lot of effort into raising him. Thus, Origin definitely had this bit of value to get a few spots. However, he would not accept a reward without doing something for it. "What requests does Brother Origin have?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "A favor." Origin smiled faintly and raised a finger. Ling Han shrugged and said, "There are a little too many people I want to bring. That would be a very big favor." Origin's expression did not change, and he still maintained a slight smile. "Deal." Ling Han stretched out his hand. Origin also stretched out his hand. The two of them shook hands, and a deal was reached. Next, the disciples selected through the Ancestral King Academy selection set out, heading first to the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan. Ling Han ho ho. After all, they are not real members of imperial clans. So what right do they have to compete with us? Just obediently stay home. No matter how freakish you are, so what? If your cultivation level can't keep up, what right do you have to talk about competing for the throne? When these imperial sons set out, they couldn't help but run over to mock and ridicule Ling Han when they saw him standing at the gates of the academy. Could you still be so awesome now? He was just a lowly commoner, so how could he compare to them? Hey! Ling Han stood calmly with his hands clasped behind his back. Yo, you're still pretending to be calm? An imperial son laughed loudly, an expression of disdain on his face. Who knows how much pain he's feeling now? That's for sure. He could only watch us leave, while he himself could only look and sigh. If it was me, I would also feel bitter. These people continued to mock him. This was a rare opportunity. Bunch of idiots. The large black dog gave the imperial sons and imperial daughters the middle finger in return. When you're slapped in the face later, I hope your faces are thick enough and won't swell. The imperial sons and imperial daughters sneered at the large black dog's provocation. With their status, how could they bicker with a demonic dog? The 100 people were divided into 10 groups, each led by a venerate tier elite. They tore a rip into the void and headed towards the 1,000-bird imperial clan. Because some venerate tiers came earlier while some came later, a portion of them set out first. After about half of the group had left, Origin and his wife walked over. Brother Ling, Origin called out from afar. Brother Origin. Ling Han nodded as well. What was going on? The remaining people were all watching in a daze. Wasn't Ling Han the one who had defeated Origin? Why did the two of them look like good friends now? At this time, Origin and she wife had also come close. Come, let me introduce. This is my wife, Lao Pengpeng. Origin pointed at the beauty beside him. Meanwhile, this beauty acted reserved for a while. After all, she was a member of the imperial clan, so she was putting on a lot of airs. Ling Han naturally didn't mind this. He smiled at Lao Pengpeng and said, Miss Lao, these are all of you? Origin swept an eye over Ling Han and the others. Aside from Ling Han, there was also the Empress, Hu Niu, the large black dog, the little azure dragon, the little red bird, the perverted pig, and Ding Shu. Since he had taken in this lackey, he had to take care of him. Too much? Ling Han asked with a smile. It's fine. Origin nodded. He didn't even need to ask for Lao Pengpeng's opinion, and directly agreed. On the sidelines, Lao Pengpeng had no intention of objecting at all. The gaze she directed at Origin was filled with admiration and reverence. By the looks of it, she had already been completely captivated. With Origin's talent, he was completely on the level of the Golden Generation, or even surpassed it. Thus, the 1,000-bird imperial clan definitely placed great importance on him, and nurtured him like an imperial son. Seventh grandfather, we can set out now, Origin said to a certain place, his expression respectful. Ling Han knew that the two of them had been escorted here by a saint. Thus, this seventh grandfather must be the saint of the Lao clan. As expected, as his words fell, a white-browed and white-bearded old man suddenly appeared. He first looked at Ling Han for a while, then tore open the void. Then he stretched out a hand and grabbed Ling Han and the others. They sank into the void. Ha ha! You've become stupid, haven't you? The large black dog laughed loudly, his eyes sweeping over the imperial son and imperial daughters who were dumbfounded outside the void. The rip in the void had already closed. The remaining imperial sons and imperial daughters were indeed dumbfounded. What was going on here? At first, they had thought that Ling Han and his group could not possibly go to the lair of the true phoenix, and the big shots from the academy had deliberately suppressed them. No matter how naturally talented Ling Han was, so what? But who would have thought that Ling Han would actually make a connection with the 1,000-bird imperial clan, and directly go to the 1,000-bird imperial clan through this connection? How was the academy going to stop Ling Han now? Perhaps they are only inviting them as guests, and may not be able to enter into the lair of the true phoenix. An imperial son was still stubborn. That's right. After all, that is the lair of the true phoenix. One more person entering would mean a smaller share of the gains. Someone nodded in agreement. However, most people wore gloomy expressions. If they were just going to pay a visit, was there any need to choose this kind of time? Don't deceive yourself. Damn it, they had been mocking him so hard just now. But in the end, the other party did not even need to say a word, and had slapped them all in the face. There was only one word for it. Depressed. Though Ling Han and his group were not the first to set out, because it was a saint bringing them with him on their journey, their speed naturally far surpassed that of Venerate Tier. Merely 3 days later, they were the first to break through the void and arrive on a planet. This planet was enshrouded by a great formation, and from the outside, it looked completely empty, as if it did not exist at all. And if anyone dared to barge in forcefully, even a saint would be killed. Great Emperor Killing Formation. This was the ancestral grounds of the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan. They had been protected by the Great Emperor Killing Formation for generations, and as long as there was no internal strife, they could exist for eternity. After arriving, Ling Han and the others had accommodations arranged for them. After waiting for a few more days, the Imperial sons and Imperial daughters were all in place, and they would then go to the lair of the true Phoenix. A few days later, the first batch of people to set out arrived. They were also arranged to stay in a courtyard nearby. The group was enraptured and seemed to be very happy. Haha! I really reminisce about Ling Han's expression at that time. He couldn't even say a single word. That's right. A lowly commoner is a lowly commoner. The moment it comes to this, he would show his true colors. Aside from scowling, what else could he do? After this adventure to the lair of the true Phoenix ends, I still have to give him a good mocking when I return. We have to let him know what we have gained, and make him die of envy. These people chatted as they walked, and very soon, a figure appeared ahead of them. He was presently sitting under a large tree and drinking tea. Why does this figure look a little familiar? Impossible, we're the first batch of people to arrive, and in the case of the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan, we don't know anyone. So strange. I also feel that this person looks a little familiar. Let's go take a look. These people quickened their pace and soon reached him. Then, the latter turned around to take a look. Fuck! In that instant, everyone was turned into stone. Fuck! Ling Han. How could it possibly be Ling Han? Shouldn't this guy be filled with envy in the Ancestral King Academy? But was there anyone in this world that looked so similar? All of a sudden, these Imperial sons and Imperial daughters were all dumbfounded, completely rendered speechless. Ling Han smiled faintly and put down his teacup. What is it? I haven't seen you for a few days, and you don't recognize me anymore. This tone. That's right, it must be Ling Han. The Imperial sons and Imperial daughters were all certain that Ling Han was definitely the only one who could say such a very ordinary thing but would attract so much hatred. Why are you here? Xianxia asked. This was also what the others were curious about. They all turned their eyes to Ling Han. Oh, I asked the people of the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan for help, and they brought me here, Ling Han said very casually. Hey! This was a chance to enter into the lair of the true Phoenix, so how precious was it? How could it be given to you just because you asked for it? You see, the Ancestral King Academy only had 100 slots. Furthermore, this was still because opening the lair of the true Phoenix required a great amount of blood from prodigies. Otherwise, the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan would definitely have benefited from it on their own. Why would they have taken out such a great opportunity to share with others? However, the problem was that Ling Han was indeed sitting here. Moreover, he had arrived here before them. Thus, he had definitely been brought here by a saint. After some calculations, the person was definitely a saint from the Thousand-Bird Imperial clan. I'm about to go crazy. These Imperial sons and Imperial daughters all wore awkward expressions. At first, they had thought that they would be able to leave Ling Han far behind them, so what if you are freakishly talented? If your cultivation level is low, you would still be trampled on by others. But now, Ling Han had come. Previously, they had been mocking and conceited, but now it seemed like they were mocking themselves. How embarrassing. Ling Han, you're too despicable. Kong Wuyang shouted angrily. Previously, he had been thrashed by Ling Han, and even now, he was still unable to raise his head in the academy. Now, he had been tricked by Ling Han, which made him extremely furious. You clearly could have come here as well, yet chose to keep it a secret and laugh at us. How shameless! Ling Han was astounded. This can become a reason for you to reprimand me? Oh, if I can't get a place, I'll be mocked by you guys. If I get a place, you guys wouldn't be able to mock me, and it's my fault? This was too ridiculous, wasn't it? Are you asking for a beating? Ling Han asked calmly. Towards someone who couldn't even make heads or tails of the situation, convincing others with strength was the best choice. Kong Wuyang was instantly rendered speechless. In terms of battle prowess, he was truly no match for Ling Han. Ling Han, you're very arrogant, another Imperial son said. He was the silver generation elite of the Demon Wolf Imperial clan. His name was Di Luo, and he was one of the top 10 elites of the spiritual transformation tier. He had most likely reached the 6th change or above that. Ling Han smiled calmly. If you have the strength, so what if you act a little arrogant? You are courting death. Di Luo's baleful voice rang out. If I want to kill you, it would not exceed 10 moves at most. This was not an exaggeration, but rather because he already knew Ling Han's strength, and that was why he had such confidence. Come on then. Ling Han crooked a finger at him. Within 10 moves, if you can even touch the corner of my robes, you win. Boom! Di Luo took a step forwards, his terrifying aura surging. Even if those around them were Imperial daughters and Imperial sons, they still felt their scalps go numb. Too strong. Brother Di, it's time to teach this brat a lesson. Humph, always avoiding battle in the academy. Now that we're here, where else do you have to hide? Beat him up. A considerable number of Imperial sons hooted. Naturally, they had all been personally taught a lesson by Ling Han. For example, Kong Wuyang, Guanxia, and Su Yukei. The image of a silver wolf appeared behind Di Luo, and it suddenly howled at the sky. A soundless wave rippled out. This was divine sense, and it instantly surged into everyone's minds. Even if this attack was aimed at Ling Han, and the others were only affected by a slight ripple, they still felt as if their souls were about to be sucked away. This was a mystical power of the Demon Wolf Imperial clan. Its name was Demon Wolf Soul Devourer, and it was an extremely terrifying mystical power that could penetrate one's mind. Boom! Ling Han's mind rippled. The spiritual body of destruction immediately unleashed a supreme might, easily dispersing the Demon Wolf Soul Devourer. It would be rude not to reciprocate. Ling Han wanted to unleash his murderous aura attack, but it wasn't as if he didn't have soul-level attacks. Hold on, the Imperial Son had a precious tool left behind by the Great Emperor to protect his soul. The barrage of murderous aura would not be effective. He had long since experimented with this. That horn? A thought flashed in Ling Han's mind. This horn had astonishing effects on the wolf tribe. He wondered if it would be useful for this Di Luo. Die! When Di Luo saw that the Demon Wolf Soul Devourer was ineffective, he immediately launched another attack. Hong! 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 He was at least a spiritual transformation tier 6 change elite, and was also a silver generation elite. Thus, his battle prowess naturally far surpassed Ling Han's. As he delivered his attack, he turned into a snow-white wolf that was formed by regulations. High-level energy surged, and its destructive power was incredibly terrifying. Even Ling Han didn't dare to come into contact with it. The gap in battle prowess was too wide. If he was hit, even if he didn't die, he would be severely injured. His figure retreated rapidly, and with a wave of his hand, the Earth Dragon rose up, blocking that fierce wolf. Pong! The ferocious wolf was terrifying. With a single crash, the Earth Dragon was shattered, and it pounced towards Ling Han again. Thankfully, with this buffer, it was enough for Ling Han to put some distance between them. However, Di Luo continued to attack, and more silver wolves appeared on the scene. Each silver wolf possessed great destructive power, causing Ling Han to have less and less space to move around. Good one. It's time to extinguish this brat's spirit. Does he really think that he can blot out the heavens with one hand? This world still belongs to us, the Imperial clans. All the Imperial sons and Imperial daughters were cheering for Di Luo. Though the battle was not over yet, the result was already clear. Ling Han had definitely lost. The only difference was when he would lose. Was that the case? Ling Han took out the horn, and with the help of the Earth Dragon, he quietly blew it. A soundless shockwave spread out, and Di Luo's attack came to an abrupt stop. What was going on? All the imperial sons and imperial daughters were curious. As long as he continued to press his advantage, Ling Han's defeat should have been within a few moves. Why had Di Luo wasted such a good opportunity? Before anyone could ask, they could clearly see that Di Luo had suddenly sprawled out on the ground. Then they heard pa pa pa. This was the sound of clothes tearing. They were all dumbfounded with shock, and they could see that Di Luo's clothes had already been forcefully torn apart, revealing his snow-white fur. This silver generation elite had actually turned back into his original form in public. The Demon Wolf Imperial clan was a member of the demon race and wolf tribe. Everyone knew this, so it was not strange that Di Luo could take the form of a wolf. The question is, why are you in wolf form now? And what was even more shocking was that after Di Luo turned into a wolf, he actually wagged his tail happily and jogged towards Ling Han, using his head to rub against Ling Han's leg. Are you really an imperial son? Are you really a member of the wolf tribe? This was clearly a dog, trying to please its master. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded. In truth, Ling Han was only giving it a try. After all, imperial sons and imperial daughters all had treasures to protect their souls. However, this great emperor horn had extraordinary effects on the wolf tribe. Thus, Ling Han took it out to give it a try. He had not deliberately targeted Di Luo, but in truth, the others were not affected at all, that all of them were howling at the skies, but Di Luo had uncontrollably taken the form of a wolf and treated him like his master. This horn was really aimed at the wolf tribe. Who exactly had made it? An enemy of the wolf tribe? Firstly, this had to be the bone of a great emperor. Otherwise, others could not possibly have obtained the bone of a great emperor and refined it. But what great emperor would do something so pointless? If they were dissatisfied with the wolf tribe, they could directly erase them. Could it be that this great emperor had a wicked sense of humor and wanted to make the wolf tribe his eternal slave? Hold on, that wasn't right either. You see, the power of other imperial clans could all resist the great emperor horn, but only Di Luo could not. Could it be that this was a technique of the wolf emperor? Only if the wolf emperor acted would he be able to avoid being affected by the great power of a great emperor. That was because the precious tool that Di Luo possessed was created by him in the first place, so he naturally could easily render it ineffective. That should be the case. The surroundings were completely silent, with only the sound of Di Luo continuously sticking out his tongue and wagging his tail. He could not be any more obedient. Ling Han cracked a smile, looked towards Kong Wuyong and the others, then pointed with his finger. Bite! Ayo! Di Luo immediately pounced out. At this moment, it was as if all his intelligence had been erased, and he had turned into a wild wolf. The only difference there was between him and wild beasts was that he would obey Ling Han's commands. Chaos instantly swept through the surroundings. Di Luo was extremely powerful, ranked in the top 10 of the spiritual transformation tier. If he attacked, he alone would be enough to suppress the combined forces of Kong Wuyong and the others. At this time, the second batch of imperial sons and imperial daughters arrived. Seeing this scene, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Di Luo had actually taken the form of a demonic beast and was hunting down Kong Wuyong and the others? What kind of enmity was this? Moreover, you have the absolute advantage in strength, so what do you mean by turning into the original form of the demon race? The situation is slightly off. The imperial daughter of the Wentian imperial clan, Yan Feiyao, said. She immediately charged out, approaching Di Luo. At present, Di Luo was no longer under the control of his reason. He was completely supported by his instincts, that he could only obey Ling Han's commands. Seeing that someone was stopping him from completing his command, he naturally moved to attack without any reservations. Hong! 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 The two of them battled fiercely. Yan Feiyao was similarly strong. She was also one of the top 10 spiritual transformation tier elites, and her battle prowess was not inferior to Di Luo at all. But now, one of them seemed to have gone mad, completely disregarding the possibility that he would be injured or crippled. Every move was fatal, and this naturally caused great pressure on Yan Feiyao. She was still rational, so how could she possibly fight so desperately with Di Luo? Thus, she was naturally at a disadvantage. Thankfully, it wasn't long before a third wave of people arrived. This time, there was a sect master elite that had already advanced into the minor advanced tier. He moved and directly suppressed Di Luo. After asking about the situation, the two groups of people that came later all looked towards Ling Han. It was already inconceivable that this guy could come here, and now, as they fought, he actually caused Di Luo to lose all reason, and directly turn into the form of a demon wolf? What the hell? Imperial Sons had a precious tool that had been personally forged by the great emperor. It could protect the soul, and even saints could not affect it. Thus, Di Luo's sudden loss of reason was incredibly bizarre. Ling Han, what despicable means have you used? The sect master level, the Imperial Son shouted at Ling Han, his expression extremely proud. This was natural. He was the golden generation, and after advancing into the minor advanced tier, a sect master could be called a great elite. He was Imperial Son Kuei. Ling Han had seen him in the True Dragon Abyss before. At that time, this person had even wanted to kill him. He had never thought that just as he was about to enter the lair of the true phoenix, the two of them would meet again. Was this considered fate? Ling Han smiled calmly. Don't use your knowledge as a frog at the bottom of a well to guess my abilities. Hiss, this was publicly provoking him. Imperial Son Kuei smiled coldly and balefully. Without another word, he immediately attacked. Boom, he was too strong. This was sect master level. As he stretched out his right hand, black-colored demonic clouds blotted out the skies and covered the earth. At least, everything within a radius of 50 kilometers was within the range of his attack. However, Ling Han was no ordinary spirit transformation tier cultivator. He activated the star steps, and he instantly disappeared. Imperial Son Kuei frowned upon hearing this. He truly deserved to die. The star steps was far too freakish. In fact, he could even manage to escape from the hands of a venerate tier elite. He was only at the level of sect master, so it was even more impossible for him to capture Ling Han. How could a mere spirit transformation tier cultivator be so difficult to kill? At this time, Di Luo also slowly recovered. He did not dare take human form, because his clothes had all burst when he had transformed just now. If he took human form now, he would be completely naked. He might as well just play dumb. Di Luo lay motionless on the ground, his heart filled with killing intent. He had actually made such a huge fool of himself in front of so many people, causing him to be filled with hatred towards Ling Han. However, the moment he thought of that figure, he actually felt a sense of reverence rise up from the depths of his heart. How was this possible? His strength was clearly far superior to Ling Han, so why did he revere such a human? After a few star steps, Ling Han returned to his room. The battle with Di Luo and the others could only be considered a diversion, and he did not take it to heart. Several days later, everyone had arrived. All right, he could go to the lair of the true phoenix now. The saint from the 1,000-bird imperial clan moved out, bringing everyone into the depths of the universe. Not too long after, they stopped in an empty galaxy. This was the lair of the true phoenix? That saint summoned the imperial weapon. After awakening it, Hong, a terrifying imperial might surged out, causing a great many people to involuntarily tremble. And this was still because the people that had come here were all Imperial Son and Imperial Daughter level. Otherwise, they would not just be shivering, but would directly kneel down. At this moment, the void in front of them seemed to have reacted. A ray of light circulated, and then a massive bird's nest appeared. This was really a bird's nest, though it had been enlarged countless times over. In fact, it was even larger than most planets. The bird's nest was crimson-red in color, and circulated with brilliance, as if it was burning. There was an indescribable majesty about it. This was the lair of the true phoenix? Blood. The saint from the 1,000-bird imperial clan said. Everyone had long since prepared themselves, and they all slit their wrists, squeezing out some blood. The saint from the 1,000-bird imperial clan collected all of this blood, then pressed it forwards. Boom! The red light trembled, and a passageway suddenly appeared. It's open! A secret technique of the true phoenix. Everyone looked expectant. According to legends, the most powerful secret technique of the true phoenix is the phoenix wings divine flight. This is a movement technique. In the past, when the true phoenix ventured out, as she passed, supreme flames lit up the surrounding galaxy. Not only that, but Phoenix Wing's divine flight also possess a powerful offensive ability. The extermination true flames they stimulate are also incredibly terrifying. We must obtain it. The Imperial Sons and Imperial Daughters' eyes lit up. Go on. The saint from the 1,000-bird Imperial clan led the way, wanting to enter into the passageway. However, he had only taken one step when he stopped. It was not that he had changed his mind at the last minute, but rather that he had been blocked by an invisible force. He had a feeling that if he tried to be stubborn, he would be torn to shreds. When the Imperial weapon awakened, he would naturally be safe. However, the problem was that a saint couldn't keep the Imperial weapon in a constant awakened state. Thus, he definitely couldn't be stubborn. This was most likely the Great Emperor Killing Formation. Even though it could only act as a static defense, it was 100 times more terrifying than the Imperial weapon. Saints couldn't enter, and when the Venerate Tears tried, their expressions also changed drastically. Right, even Venerate Tears wouldn't be able to. Then what about Sect Masters? Still wouldn't work. It wasn't until the Spirit Transformation Tears took their turn that they weren't affected by the Great Emperor Killing Formation, allowing them to pass safely. The Spiritual Transformation Tier was fine, the True Self Tier was fine, and even slightly lower cultivation level could enter. In other words, this Great Emperor Killing Formation only placed a maximum limit on cultivation level and had no requirements for the minimum level. Ling Han's heart calmed. Without a Sect Master Elite competing with him, even if he was no match for a 7th change or 8th change when he encountered them, he would still be able to escape easily and would not have to depend on the star steps. It could be imagined that in this lair of the true phoenix, ley lines should not exist. Everyone entered one after another, and those golden generation elites that had long since advanced into Sect Master Tier looked livid. Such a great opportunity, and they could only watch helplessly as it passed them by? To say nothing of the fact that the Imperial Sons and Imperial Daughters of the other clans couldn't possibly share their gains with them, even if it was from their own clan, who didn't want to become emperor. Would they take it out to share? Thus, they could only miss out on this great opportunity. Humph! The Golden Generation elites all flicked their sleeves before turning around to leave. They had lost blood essence for nothing, yet it was only paving the way for others. They were furious. Ling Han walked in front, while Ding Shu was the last. After walking for a long time, they suddenly felt a powerful suction force. Even Ling Han was unable to resist. With a show, they were all sucked in. Instantly, their figures sped up, and the scene that they saw also underwent a massive change. The stars and the sun flashed past them like a revolving lantern one. Io! Their bodies suddenly trembled, and they were sent flying. Where was this? They looked around, and saw that this was actually a primeval forest. Huge trees grew everywhere. These trees were very strange. The trunks were crimson red, and the leaves that grew were like flames. There was clearly no wind, but every single leaf was flickering and burning. They came closer to take a look, and saw that the leaves of this tree were really flames. However, the strange thing was that though the leaves were burning flames, the tree trunk did not look like it was burning at all. Voila! Right at this moment, endless flames suddenly boiled from the forest, soaring into the skies. No, these weren't flames, but rather firebirds. These birds were all formed from flames, and as they flapped their wings, they released strange screeches as they swooped towards Ling Han and the others. Everyone hurriedly counterattacked, but the moment they came into contact, they felt tremendous pressure. These firebirds weren't difficult to kill, but what was terrifying was that when they were burnt to death, they would all self-explode. Terrifying energy surged, capable of easily burning a spirit transformation tier elite to severe injury. One or two was still fine, but the point was that there were too many firebirds here. If they exploded in groups, that would be terrifying. To say nothing of Linghan, even spirit transformation tier elites such as Di Luo and the others couldn't withstand it. They immediately turned around and fled. However, firstly, the path of return was already gone. They had been sucked in, and secondly, even if the path that they had come from was still there, they would not leave. Oh, they had just entered and were already chased off, and they still wanted the secret technique of the true phoenix? Thus, everyone fled in all directions. At this time, it was naturally themselves that was most important, so how could they have the time to care about others? Ling Han protected the Empress and the others as they retreated. Ding Shu was his capable assistant, while the perverted pig barely managed to avoid being a burden for them. As for the others, because the large black dog, the little azure dragon, and the others hadn't stepped into the spirit transformation tier yet, they didn't dare to make a move at all. Otherwise, if the firebird exploded beside them, that would really be a suicidal action. As the group battled, they retreated, leaving the forest far behind. Only when a large river appeared ahead of them did those firebirds finally give up their pursuit, and turned around to return. Everyone examined themselves, and all of them were injured. Ling Han and Ding Shu were the main force, so they naturally bore the brunt of it. Meanwhile, the Empress, the large black dog, and the others were affected because their cultivation level was too low. Merely being affected by the flames that had exploded from the firebird was enough to cause them serious injury. They had gained some time to catch their breath, and hurriedly stopped to rest. Thankfully, everyone had cultivated the Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique. This was body arts which also had astonishing effects on healing injuries. As long as their foundations were not damaged, they could still recover very quickly. Ling Han was the first to finish resting. He stood up and explored the surrounding environment. Soon, his attention was focused on that great river. Previously, he had not had the time to pay attention. But from the look of things now, Ling Han couldn't help but bare his teeth, because this was not a river, but rather surging lava. He walked closer, and saw that there were seals continuously popping up in the lava. That was the concentrated energy of high-level flames. If he was burned, he would definitely be in trouble. It was said that the true phoenix had passed away in the true phoenix's lair. Thus was the forest of flames and river of lava formed from the regulations of the true phoenix after its death. That was the level of a great emperor, so no matter how powerful it was understandable. Ling Han looked ahead, only to see that there was actually a small mountain floating in the lava river. What kind of mountain was this that it could actually not be melted by the lava? Ling Han was very curious. This was no ordinary lava, but rather the condensation of high-level energy, which could easily burn divine metal. Treasure? He walked in the direction up course of the flow of the river, heading towards that small mountain. One was going down the river's course while the other was going up the river's course. Naturally, they met very quickly. Now that they were closer, Ling Han naturally could see more clearly. This small mountain was shaped like a regular ball, but it was not rounded, and was exuding an ancient aura. However, was there really something strange about this? Ling Han activated his eye technique, wanting to see clearly. However, the power of the boiling flames blocked his vision, and he couldn't see clearly. Hua! Right at this moment, the river of lava suddenly boiled, and a large amount of crimson lava was poured out, falling towards Ling Han. Ling Han retreated quickly. With a swoosh, the lava landed on the bank, immediately burning fiercely. Boom! A massive sound wave rippled out, and that small mountain suddenly rose up. Then, a massive pillar was seen crashing towards Ling Han. This wasn't a pillar. This time, Ling Han could clearly see that what was floating in the river wasn't a small mountain at all, but a fire turtle. Presently, it was precisely this fire turtle that was attacking him. With a stomp, its skin was covered with dark red divine patterns. Boom!